Welcome back to the pack, my lovely returning listeners, and a massive welcome to everyone new joining us here at Linas Romantasy Collection. You have found the perfect corner of the internet for your supernatural fix. Today's story is going to absolutely wreck you in the best way possible. Imagine this. It's 2 a.m., you're broke, you're freezing, and you are terrified to open an email from your landlord because you're late on rent again. But what happens when that infuriatingly handsome, suit-wearing landlord steps out of the shadows to save your life from thugs? What happens when you offer to pay him back and he looks at you with glowing gold eyes and growls the one thing you never expected to hear? Your debt is paid. You belong to me. We are diving into a world of high-stakes finance, dangerous obsession, and an alpha who takes his property rights very seriously. But before we unlock the penthouse door, do me a huge favor, smash that like button if you love a possessive hero, share this video with your bestie who needs a book boyfriend, and hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. I want to know how big our pack is getting. Drop a comment below and tell me exactly where in the world you are listening from today. Represent your city. Now, let's see what happens when the lease runs out. Chapter 1. The email notification on my phone screen glowed with the kind of brightness that felt personal. It was 2:14 a.m. Subject: overdue rent notice. Second warning. Sender: J. Caldwell. Landlord. I hate him, I muttered, shivering as the bitter wind cut through my thin blazer. I hate him and his perfectly manicured hedges and his inability to understand that freelance forensic accounting is a boom or bust industry. Currently, it was bust. The Uber driver had dumped me 3 blocks from my apartment complex because, and I quote, "That alleyway looks like a scene from a documentary about unsolved murders." "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Kevin," I yelled at the retreating taillights. I adjusted my heavy laptop bag, the strap digging into my shoulder. I needed to get home, I needed to sleep, and tomorrow I needed to explain to James Caldwell, my infuriatingly hot and strictly robotic landlord, that my rent check wasn't bouncing, it was just doing a little parkour before landing in his account. I turned the corner toward the shortcut that led to the back entrance of the Ironwood. It was an old industrial building converted into lofts, situated on the edge of the city where the streetlights flickered like they were sending distress signals in Morse code. Click. My boots hit a puddle, but the sound that followed wasn't a splash. It was a scrape, leather on concrete. Behind me. I stopped. The hair on my arms stood up, a primal lizard brain warning system that had nothing to do with accounting. "Hey, sweetheart." The voice was wet, raspy, like gravel in a blender. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, faster this time. "I don't have cash, I don't have cigarettes, and I possess a taser that has a very trigger-happy battery," I lied loudly. I didn't own a taser. I owned a glittery pepper spray canister that expired in 2019. "She's feisty. The boss said she'd be difficult." A second voice, deeper. I froze. The boss? This wasn't a mugging. Muggers didn't have performance reviews and bosses who gave briefings on my personality quirks. I spun around, clutching my bag like a shield. 3 men stood at the mouth of the alley. They were huge. Not gym rat huge, but wrong huge. Their shoulders were hunched forward, their necks too thick for their collars. They looked like they'd been built in a lab that prioritized bulk over aesthetics. And they smelled. Even from 20 feet away, the scent hit me. Wet dog, copper, and rotting trash. "Look," I said, my voice shaking, but my chin high, "if this is about my student loans, you guys are aggressively overqualified for debt collection." The middle one grinned. His teeth were yellow and looked filed, pointed. "Grab her. Don't mark the skin too bad. He wants her intact." "Intact?" I squeaked. "Who talks like that?" They lunged. I didn't wait to find out. I turned and sprinted. I was a runner. Cardio was the only way I managed my anxiety, but these guys were fast, unnaturally fast. I could hear heavy, panting breaths right behind my ear. The Ironwood. I just had to make it to the property line.
James had installed that ridiculous high-tech gate last month. He'd lectured me for 20 minutes about the biometric integrity of the perimeter. "Come here, little rabbit," one of them growled. Rabbit? Gross. I burst out of the alley and onto the private service road that led to my building. The massive iron gate was 50 yards away. "Help!" I screamed, my lungs burning. "Fire! Murder! Jaywalking!" Something heavy clipped my ankle. I stumbled, scraping my palms against the asphalt, my laptop bag skidding away. A hand, large, dirty, and ending in fingernails that looked like talons, clamped around my calf. "Gotcha," the man grunted. I kicked him in the face, hard. My boot connected with a sickening crunch, but he didn't even yell. He just snarled, a low, vibrating sound that rumbled in his chest like a subwoofer. "What are you on?" I gasped, scrambling backward on my elbows. "PCP? Bath salts?" He dragged me back, his grip bruising. The other two were closing in, their eyes glinting in the dark with a weird, reflective sheen. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the worst. "Chirp, chirp! Chirp, chirp!" A piercing electronic sound cut through the growling. Suddenly, floodlights blinded us. High-voltage halogen beams mounted on the brick wall of the apartment complex snapped on, bathing the service road in harsh white light. The man holding me hissed, shielding his eyes. "Clause 4, Section B." A deep, bored voice resonated from the shadows near the gate. The thug dropped my leg. Joms Caldwell stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing his usual crisp button-down shirt. He was in sweatpants and a dark gray t-shirt that clung to him in ways that should be illegal for a landlord. He was holding a tablet in one hand and looking at it with a mild expression of annoyance. "Who the hell are you?" the thug snarled, stepping over me to face him. James didn't look up from his screen. According to my security app, 3 unauthorized biological masses just crossed the geofence at 2:17 a.m. I was in the middle of a very REM-heavy sleep cycle.
He finally looked up. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they locked onto the man who had grabbed me. "You're trespassing," James said calmly, "and you're getting dirt on my tenant." "Walk away, pretty boy," the thug sneered, pulling a knife that looked more like a machete. "Or we gut you too." James sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had to explain to a toddler why they couldn't eat a battery. "I hate paperwork," James muttered. Then he moved. It happened so fast my brain couldn't process it. One second, James was standing 10 feet away. The next, he was a blur of violence. He didn't fight like a person. He fought like a wrecking ball. He grabbed the knife-wielding thug by the throat and slammed him into the brick wall with enough force to crack the masonry. The thug dropped instantly. The other two roared, actually roared, and rushed him. "James, look out!" I screamed, scrambling to my feet. James ducked a punch that would have taken his head off, grabbed the attacker's arm, and twisted. There was a snap, a howl, and James tossed the 200-pound man aside like a bag of potting soil. The last one hesitated, looking between his fallen friends and James. James straightened his t-shirt. He wasn't even out of breath. He took a step forward, and the air around him seemed to get heavier, thicker. He growled, a low, terrifying sound that vibrated in my teeth. "Run," James commanded. One word: absolute authority. The last thug didn't argue. He turned and bolted back into the darkness, leaving his unconscious buddies behind. Silence descended on the service road, broken only by the hum of the floodlights and my frantic heart rate. James turned to me. He looked terrifying. His jaw was clenched, his muscles tight, and there was a wild, predatory look in his eyes that took a second to fade back into his usual icy demeanor. He marched toward me. I flinched. "James, oh my God, those guys they were on drugs or something. Did you see his teeth? Thank you, I thought I was dead. He stopped right in front of me, invading my personal space. He smelled like expensive sandalwood and rain? He pointed a finger at my chest. "Me?" I blinked. "You triggered the perimeter alarm." He held up the tablet. "Do you know how sensitive these sensors are? I have to recalibrate them now." I stared at him, my mouth falling open. What? I was almost kidnapped by a gang of steroid freaks, and you're worried about your sensors? "You're late on rent," he countered, crossing his arms.
The biceps bulging against his t-shirt were distracting, but I focused on his face. I was running for my life, I shouted, hysterica bubbling up. Wait, how did you get out here so fast? You live on the top floor. That's 8 stories up. There's no way the elevator is that fast. James stiffened slightly. I took the stairs. I'm very fit. You beat up 3 giant men in 10 seconds. They had poor form, no center of gravity, he dismissed, waving a hand. He grabbed my arm, his grip firm but surprisingly gentle, and started dragging me toward the gate. Come on, inside, now. Hey, my laptop bag, I protested, digging my heels in. James groaned, marched back, scooped up my bag effortlessly with one hand, and returned to haul me toward the lobby. You are a chaos magnet, Cleo Vance, he grumbled, punching the code into the gate. Next time you decide to bring a criminal element to my property, check the lease. There is a strict, no unauthorized solicitation policy. They weren't solicitors, they were trying to abduct me. He stopped at the glass doors of the lobby and looked down at me. For a second, the annoyance vanished, replaced by something darker. His gaze dropped to my torn stocking and the scraped skin on my knee. His nostrils flared. You're bleeding, he said quietly. I scraped it on the pavement. Go to your apartment, he ordered, his voice dropping an octave. Lock the door, do not open it for anyone, not even the police. I will call them. Why? Because he opened the door and shoved me gently inside, turning back toward the unconscious lump of a man on the pavement. I need to take out the trash before it wakes up. James, that guy needs an ambulance, not a trash can. Go upstairs, Cleo, he barked. The command hit me in the chest like a physical weight. My knees wobbled, and suddenly arguing felt impossible. I nodded mutely and backed toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw James Caldwell standing under the floodlights, rolling up his sleeves. He didn't look like a landlord. He looked like a king standing over a battlefield. And I had the sinking feeling that my overdue rent was the least of my problems.
Chapter 2. My apartment was a shrine to organized chaos, which was a polite way of saying I had 3 piles of laundry, clean, dirty, and ambiguous. I slammed the deadbolt home, then the chain, then I dragged a dining chair under the doorknob for good measure. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My knee was throbbing. I looked down. The scrape was nasty, oozing blood onto my favorite rug, which I'd bought at a thrift store for $5, but still. Okay, Cleo, breathe, I whispered. Just a random act of violence, totally normal for a Tuesday. James called the cops. James is handling it. James. The image of him tossing a 200-pound man like a sack of dry rice flashed in my mind. And that growl. Who growls at muggers? Maybe he did CrossFit. CrossFit people were weirdly intense. Knock, knock, knock. 3 precise, authoritative raps on the door. I jumped a foot in the air. Who is it? Landlord, James' voice came through the wood. Open up. I'm okay, I called back, my voice squeaking. You said lock the door. I meant lock it against them, not me. Open the door, Cleo. I have a first aid kit and a liability waiver I need you to sign. I blinked. A liability waiver? Your insurance premiums will skyrocket if you sue me. Open the door. I groaned. Of course. He saves my life and immediately pivots to risk management. I moved the chair and undid the locks. James filled the doorway. He had changed his shirt, now wearing a tight black Henley, and held a sleek white medical box. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his dark eyes scanning my apartment with critical precision. He frowned at the ambiguous laundry pile. Do you ever actually fold anything? He asked, setting the box on my wobbly coffee table. I have a system, I snapped, limping over to the couch. Where are the police? Did they arrest those guys? James knelt down in front of me, popping the latches on the medical box. He didn't look up. The authorities arrived. The individuals were taken into custody. Apparently, they were high on a new synthetic street drug, causes aggression, hallucinations, and excessive drooling. They called me a rabbit, I shivered. James's hands paused.
His knuckles went white for a split second before he resumed pulling out antiseptic wipes. "Drug-induced psychosis," he said flatly. "Give me your leg." "I can do it myself." "You're shaking," he noted. He wasn't asking. He reached out, his large, warm hand encompassing my calf. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up my spine. His skin was burning hot, like he was running a fever. He gently cleaned the scrape on my knee. For a guy who just brutalized 3 men, his touch was impossibly careful. "So, you fight in a cage or something? You wrecked those guys." James applied a large bandage, smoothing the edges down with his thumbs. He stayed there for a moment, his hand resting on my knee, his thumb tracing a small circle on my skin. He took a deep breath, inhaling through his nose as if he were trying to smell my fabric softener. "I protect my investments," he murmured, his voice dropping to that rough, gravelly register again. "And tenants who pay rent, eventually, are investments." He looked up, our eyes locked. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, charged with static. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. He looked hungry, not "I skipped dinner" hungry, wolf hungry. "James?" I whispered. He blinked, and the intensity vanished, replaced by his usual mask of boredom. He stood up abruptly. "I'm staying," he announced. "What?" "The lock on the front gate was damaged during the altercation. The perimeter is compromised. Until the repair crew arrives in the morning, I am implementing a manual security override." "Which means?" He walked over to my armchair, spun it around to face the door, and sat down, crossing his long legs. "I am sitting here. You are going to sleep." "You're going to watch me sleep? That's serial killer behavior, James." "I'm watching the door, Cleo. You just happen to be in the room." He pulled his tablet out of nowhere. "Go to sleep. If you're not unconscious in 20 minutes, I'm raising your rent by 5% for emotional distress caused to the landlord." "You're a tyrant," I muttered, grabbing a blanket. "I'm a businessman," he corrected, not looking up from his screen. "Good night, Ms. Vance." I curled up on the couch, watching him. He didn't move. He sat like a stone statue, radiating a strange, comforting heat that warmed the whole drafty room. I thought I wouldn't be able to sleep, but the adrenaline crash hit me like a freight train. Within minutes, the rhythmic tapping of his finger on the tablet screen lulled me into the dark.
Chapter 3. I woke up to the smell of roasted coffee beans and the sound of someone aggressively typing. Sunlight streamed through the grimy window. I sat up, popping my neck. James was still there. He was sitting at my tiny dining table, which was actually a cart table, surrounded by stacks of paper files he must have brought down while I was asleep. He had also, apparently, made coffee. A fresh pot sat on the counter. "You have a surprisingly adequate coffee maker for someone who can't afford a toaster," James said without turning around. "Priorities," I croaked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "Did you sleep at all?" "No." "Are you a vampire?" He stiffened, then slowly turned his chair around. "Don't be ridiculous. Vampires are a fictional construct used to sell teen romance novels. I have insomnia." He pushed a mug toward me. "Drink. We need to discuss your financial solvency." I bristled, fully awake now. "Hey, it's 8 a.m. Can I have 5 minutes before you evict me?" "I'm not evicting you," he sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. It was the first time I'd seen him look even slightly disheveled. It was unfairly attractive. "I'm looking at my own books, specifically the maintenance budget for this building." I grabbed the coffee and walked over to peer over his shoulder. The table was covered in spreadsheets and invoices labeled Caldwell Holdings. "Why?" I asked. "Because the security system upgrade that I need to buy to keep you from getting kidnapped again costs $60,000, and my liquid assets for this property are currently tied up in a zoning dispute." I squinted at the spreadsheet he was working on. It was a chaotic mess of numbers. "Wait," I pointed a finger at column D. "Why is your provider for pest control charging you a variable rate based on square footage plus a retainer fee? That's not industry standard." James frowned. "It's a specialized service for large pests." "It's a ripoff," I said, leaning in closer. The accountant in me took over.
And look at this. You have a recurring outflow to Shell Tech Solutions for $4,500 a month. But here, in your tax write-offs, you listed Shell Tech as a charitable donation. James froze. What? Shell Tech isn't registered as a vendor. They're filed under charitable contributions using a falsified 501c3 tax ID, I explained, tapping the paper. Ryan buried it deep in the subledger so your main accountants wouldn't flag it, but the address, it matches the P.O. box for the pest control company. See? Suite 4B versus Suite 4-B. I just ran the cross-reference on the state registry. I tapped the final line on the screen. Owner listed? Ryan Blackwood. Someone is skimming money from you, James. They're double billing you under 2 different names. James stared at the paper. Then he stared at me. His eyes narrowed. You found that in 30 seconds? I'm a forensic accountant, I shrugged, taking a sip of coffee. It's literally the only thing I'm good at. Well, that and running away from drug addicts. James pulled the paper closer, his jaw tightening. A low, dangerous rumble started in his chest again. That company, he growled the name like a curse. It's owned by a man named Ryan Blackwood. Never heard of him, but Ryan Blackwood is embezzling about 50 grand a year from you. James stood up. He walked to the window and stared out at the street, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The tension coming off him was suffocating. Ryan, he growled the name like a curse. He's funding his recruitment drive with my money. Recruitment drive? I asked. Is he running an MLM? Is he selling essential oils? James turned back to me. The look on his face was calculating. Cleo? Yeah? How much debt are you in? Excuse me? Total. Student loans, credit cards, the money you owe for that disastrous perm you tried to write off as a business expense in 2021? That was a valid networking attempt, I defended, and it's none of your business. I'll pay it off. I dropped my coffee mug. It bounced on the rug, thank God for the rug, and spilled brown sludge everywhere. What? I will pay off your debt, all of it, and I will freeze your rent for 12 months. What's the catch? I narrowed my eyes. Do I have to give you a kidney? Because I drink a lot of diet soda. They aren't pristine. No kidneys. He stepped closer, towering over me. I need you to audit everything, every receipt, every transaction, every shell company connected to Ryan Blackwood and his associates. I need you to find every cent they've stolen from me so I can legally destroy them. You want me to be your personal forensic auditor? I want you to be my weapon, he said intensely. Then he cleared his throat. Financially speaking, a financial weapon. I looked at the mess on the rug. I looked at the overdue rent notice on the counter. Then I looked at James. Beautiful, rich, slightly terrifying James. Deal, I said, extending my hand. But I also want a new parking spot. The one I have is under a sap-dripping tree. James looked at my hand, then enveloped it in his. His grip was warm, rough, and possessed a shocking amount of strength. He didn't shake it. He just held it, his thumb grazing my knuckles again. Done, he said, softly. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and his face went stone cold. What is it? I asked. It's a text, James said, picking up the phone. From Ryan Blackwood. The embezzler? Yes. James read the text out loud, his voice devoid of emotion. Nice reflexes last night. Keep the girl close. She looks expensive. My blood ran cold. He saw us? James looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for me. He's watching, James said, grabbing his keys. Pack a bag. Where are we going? Penthouse, James commanded. Ground floor is too accessible. You're moving in with me, strictly for security purposes. James, I am not moving into your penthouse. Check the lease, Clause 19. In the event of a structural emergency or security threat, the landlord reserves the right to relocate the tenant to a secure unit. Move, Cleo, or I carry you. And looking at the size of his arms, I knew he wasn't joking. I hate Clause 19, I whispered, grabbing my laptop. I wrote it this morning, James muttered under his breath. What? Nothing. Let's go.
Chapter 4. The elevator ride to the penthouse took long enough for me to cycle through the 5 stages of grief regarding my independence. By the time the door slid open with a soft, expensive whoosh, I had reached acceptance, which mostly involved accepting that James Caldwell had really nice amenities. "Welcome to the secure unit," James said, stepping out. I followed him, dragging my suitcase, and immediately stopped. "James, this isn't an apartment. This is a villain's lair from a spy movie." The penthouse was massive. It was an ocean of polished concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and furniture that looked like it cost more than my college tuition but was uncomfortable to sit on. It was beautiful, sterile, and cold. "It's functional," James muttered, dropping his keys in a bowl carved from a single piece of obsidian. "The glass is bulletproof, the walls are reinforced, the ventilation system has a filtration unit capable of scrubbing out neurotoxins." "Neurotoxins?" I raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a lot of enemies who fight with gas, or are you just prepared for a very specific type of apocalypse?" "I like to be prepared," he evaded, walking toward the kitchen. "You can take the guest suite down the hall to the left. Don't go into the room on the right. That's my office. It's sensitive." "Sensitive like secret government files, or sensitive like embarrassing collection of porcelain dolls?" James stopped at the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. He stared at me with that intense, dark gaze that always made my stomach do a weird little flip. "Sensitive like, if you go in there, you might see things that violate your NDA." "I haven't signed an NDA." "You will. It's on the counter." I rolled my eyes and wheeled my suitcase down the hall. The guest suite was bigger than my entire previous apartment. The bed was a California king with sheets that felt like spun silk. I flopped onto it, staring at the ceiling. This was insane. I was living with my landlord, my incredibly hot, emotionally distant, potentially criminal landlord who beat up thugs for fun. I unpacked quickly, needing to keep my hands busy. My mismatched socks looked pathetic in the high-end cedar drawers. When I walked back out to the living room, James was standing by the window, talking on the phone. His back to me was rigid. "I don't care if the pack is restless," he hissed into the phone. I froze. "Pack? Like a union?" "Tell them to hold the line," James continued, his voice dropping to a low, vibrating growl that I could feel in the floorboards. "If Ryan crosses the border again, I won't just send him a warning, I'll tear his—" He sensed me. I didn't make a sound, but he spun around mid-sentence, his eyes flashing. He hung up the phone instantly. "I thought you were unpacking?" he said, his voice tight. "I finished. Who were you talking to? You sounded violent." "Contractors," he lied smoothly. "Construction union. They call themselves the Pack. Very aggressive negotiators." "Right," I said, slowly. "And you were going to tear their what? Their contract?" "Exactly." He walked over to the kitchen island where a stack of file boxes was waiting. "Are you hungry?" I ordered food. "Pizza?" I asked hopefully. "Steak. Rare," James said. He opened a styrofoam container. Inside was a slab of meat so red it looked like it might still be mooing. He picked it up with a fork and took a bite, closing his eyes with a sigh of pure contentment that was a little too carnal for 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. "You eat like a dinosaur," I noted, grabbing a bread roll from the side bag. "Iron deficiency," he grunted, chewing, and he pointed a steak knife at the boxes. "These are the financial records for the last 5 years. You said you wanted to audit Ryan Blackwood. Start digging." I looked at the mountain of paperwork. "Now?" "He knows where you live, Cleo, or where you used to live. If we want to stop him, we cut off his funding. Find the money, find the man." I sighed, pulling a box toward me. "Fine, but if I find any money laundering, I'm charging double for my hourly rate." James smirked, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his face from frightening to devastatingly handsome. "If you find where he's hiding the assets, Cleo, I'll buy you the building." "Don't joke with a broke girl, James." "I never joke about real estate." I opened the first file. It was going to be a long night, but as I watched James savage his steak, looking like a king on his throne, I realized I felt safer in this cold glass box with him than I ever had in my life. Chapter 5. By 11 p.m., my eyes were burning, and I had consumed enough caffeine to kill a small horse. The dining table, which was a slab of marble that probably cost more than a Honda Civic, was covered in receipts, ledgers, and my color-coded sticky notes. James was sitting on the sofa, aggressively typing on his laptop. Every few minutes, he would stand up, pace the length of the room like a caged animal, and then sit back down. His energy was restless, frantic. It was like being locked in a room with a thunderstorm. "James, stop pacing," I muttered, not looking up from a spreadsheet. "You're making me anxious." "I'm not pacing, I'm thinking," he rumbled. "You're thinking loudly. Do you have a fidget spinner or something? Maybe a stress ball?" He stopped behind my chair. I could feel the heat radiating off him. "What have you found?" I tapped the paper in front of me with my pen. "Okay, so your pest control company, the one owned by Ryan Blackwood, it's not just overcharging you, it's funneling money into 3 different offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. But that's not the weird part." "What is the weird part?" James leaned over my shoulder. His cheek brushed against my hair, and I had to remind my heart to keep beating. "The lined items," I said, pointing. "Look at this. Invoice number 409, security consultation, $20,000. Invoice number 410, biomass disposal, $15,000. And this one, recurring every month, kibble supply, high protein. James, who is buying $50,000 worth of dog food a month?" James stiffened. He pulled away from me, his face unreadable. "It's not dog food." "It says kibble right there on the invoice." "It's industry slang," he said, quickly, too quickly. "For organic insulation compound and the green building world. We call it kibble because of the texture." I stared at him. "You call cement kibble, and you pay 50 grand for it?" "It's high-quality cement," he insisted, crossing his arms. "Look, forget the line items. Focus on the flow of funds. Where is it going after the Caymans?" I narrowed my eyes at him. He was hiding something big, but I was too tired to interrogate him about his weird construction slang. "I traced the wire transfers," I said, pulling up a map on my laptop. "The money from the Caymans is being routed back into the country through a shell corporation called Luna Logistics. And guess what address Luna Logistics is registered to?" James leaned in, his focus sharpening. "Where?" "An abandoned warehouse district in the South Ward, 4400 Clawson Avenue." James's face went deadly pale. Then a look of pure, unadulterated rage washed over him. His eyes seemed to glow in the dim light of the penthouse. "The old den," he whispered. "The what?" "Nothing," he snapped, grabbing his jacket from the back of the couch. "It's an old property I used to own. I sold it years ago." "Well, it looks like Ryan bought it back, or he's squatting there. James, if he's using your money to renovate a warehouse, he might be setting up a headquarters." James was already moving toward the door. "Stay here, lock the door behind me." "Where are you going?" I stood up, knocking my chair back. "It's almost midnight." "I need to verify the location. I need to see if he's actually there." "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." He turned on me, his voice booming. "You are a civilian. You are a liability. You stay in the tower where it's safe." "I'm the one who found the address, and you said Ryan is embezzling your money. If I don't finish this audit with physical proof of assets, the IRS is going to eat you alive. I need to see if that inventory exists." James stepped out of the elevator and grabbed my shoulders. His grip was tight, desperate. "Cleo, listen to me. Ryan isn't just a white-collar criminal. He is dangerous in ways you cannot comprehend. If you go to that warehouse and he sees you—" "He saw me yesterday. He sent you a text about it." "That is exactly why you are staying put." James roared. The sound wasn't human. It was deep, guttural, and it rattled the windows. I froze, staring at him. He looked wild. His hair was messy, his chest heaving.
He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, visibly reining himself in. When he opened them, the darkness was contained but barely. "Please," he said, his voice strained. "Stay here. Trust me. I will go check the warehouse. I will take pictures for your audit. Just stay." The elevator doors pinged open. He stepped inside. "James," I called out as the doors started to slide shut. He looked at me through the narrowing gap. "Lock the door, Cleo." The doors closed, leaving me alone in the silent glass box. I looked back at the table covered in evidence of biomass disposal and high-protein kibble. "Cement mix, my ass," I whispered to the empty room. Something was wrong with this equation, and I was going to solve it. But for tonight, I locked the door.
Chapter 6. James didn't come back that night. I fell asleep on the couch with a highlighter in my hand and woke up with a crick in my neck and a mouth that tasted like stale coffee. The penthouse was silent. The sun was blazing through the windows, turning the glass box into a greenhouse. I checked my phone. No texts from James. Great, I muttered, stretching. Ghosted by my landlord roommate. That's a new low. I went to the kitchen to forage for food. The fridge was stocked with an alarming amount of red meat, eggs, and protein shakes. No vegetables, no carbs, just pure, unadulterated protein. Does this man have a vendetta against bread? I grumbled, grabbing a carton of eggs. I was mid-scramble when the elevator chimed. I froze, spatula in hand. If it was Ryan... But the doors opened and James walked in. He looked terrible. His clothes were torn, his t-shirt shredded at the shoulder, his jeans covered in dirt and what looked disturbingly like dried blood. He was limping slightly. Behind him walked two other men. One was tall and wiry, with platinum blonde hair, and a tablet tucked under his arm. The other was massive, wider than James, with a shaved head and tattoos creeping up his neck. They both wore expensive suits that looked out of place on their bulky frames. "James!" I dropped the spatula. "Oh my God, look at you! What happened? Did you find the warehouse?" James held up a hand. "I'm fine. Industrial accident. A beam fell." "A beam fell on you?" I rushed around the island, but the two strangers stepped in front of me, blocking my path to James. The bald one sniffed the air. Actually sniffed it. His nostrils flared, and he looked at me with a mix of confusion and hostility. "Alpha," the bald one rumbled, his voice deep as a cavern. "Why is there a human in the sanctuary?" "Sanctuary? Alpha?" "She is my tenant," James snapped, pushing past them to limp toward the kitchen sink. He turned the tap on and splashed cold water on his face. "And she is my financial consultant. Stand down, Knox." Knox, the bald one, didn't stand down. He stared at me like I was an intruder. "She smells like vanilla and anxiety." "Excuse me?" I bristled, crossing my arms. "I smell like lavender detergent, thank you very much. And who are you guys? The board of directors?" The blonde one smirked. He had sharp, intelligent eyes. "Something like that. I'm Beckett. This is Knox. We handle logistics for Mr. Caldwell." "Beckett," James warned, grabbing a towel to dry his face. "Not now." "We need to discuss the incursion at the South Ward," Beckett said, ignoring James's warning tone. "James, you went in alone. That was reckless. Ryan has 12 rogues stationed there." "Rogues? Like rogue employees? Disgruntled union workers?" The three men went silent. James looked at Beckett with a gaze that promised murder. "Yes," James said slowly, turning to me. "Rogue workers. They are on strike. Very violent strike." "So you got into a fight with strikers?" I looked at his torn shirt. "James, that's a PR nightmare. You can't just beat up union workers." "They attacked me first," he defended, sounding like a petulant child. "And they aren't a recognized union. They are freelancers." Knox grunted. "Freelancers with claws." "Crowbars," James shouted, correcting him. "They had crowbars."
I looked between the three of them. The energy was weird. It was masculine, aggressive, and thick with secrets. They stood in a triangle formation, with James at the apex, like they were communicating telepathically. "Okay," I said, backing up toward the coffee pot. "I'm going to pour myself more coffee while you guys discuss your freelancer problem. But James, you need stitches. That cut on your arm looks deep." "I heal fast," he muttered. "Nobody heals that fast," I pointed out. The cut looked already clotted. It looked days old, not hours. "Good genetics," Beckett offered, with a dazzling, fake smile. James glared at him. "Beckett, Knox, go to the office. Wait for me there. I need to speak to Cleo." The two men hesitated. Knox looked at James, then at me, then dipped his head in a submissive nod that was bizarrely formal for a corporate setting. "Yes, boss." They filed into the office, the forbidden room, and closed the door. James slumped against the counter, wincing as he shifted his weight. "You're lying to me," I said quietly. "I'm protecting you." "From striking construction workers?" James looked at me. His eyes were tired, the gold flecks in his irises dull. "Cleo, Ryan isn't just stealing money. He's building an army, and he knows you're the one untangling his web. Until this is over, you don't leave this apartment without me. Do you understand?" "Is that a request or a lease clause?" "It's a plea," he said softly, reaching out to tuck a stray hair behind my ear. His hand was rough, calloused, and trembling slightly. "Please, I can't lose a tenant. It's bad for business." He was close again, too close. I could smell the blood on him, mixed with that rain and sandalwood scent. My heart hammered. "Go patch yourself up, landlord. I have more invoices to audit." Chapter 7. 3 days passed in the penthouse. It was a strange, suspended reality. James was gone during the day, presumably dealing with the strike, which sounded more like a gang war based on the snippets of phone calls I overheard. Knox and Beckett were constant fixtures. They treated me with a weird mix of suspicion and reverence. Knox would occasionally growl at the toaster if it popped too loudly, and Beckett kept trying to feed me raw steak tartare. "I like my meat cooked, Beckett," I told him for the 10th time, pushing the plate away, "with fire until it's brown." "Waste of nutrients," Beckett sniffed, typing on his tablet. It was Friday evening when the calm broke. I was on the floor, surrounded by a new batch of files James had brought in, when the elevator opened. James stormed in, looking more stressed than usual. He was holding a large black garment bag. "Get up," he commanded. "Shower. 10 minutes." "Hello to you too," I said, marking a page. "What's happening?" "We have to go out." "Out? Outside?" I scrambled up. I thought the air was toxic with freelancers. "The situation has changed," James said, hanging the bag on the closet door. "Ryan is attending the mayor's charity gala tonight. He's going to be soliciting donations, laundering the money right in front of the city's elite. And I need to be there to stop him. I need to make a show of force, show the investors that I am still in control of the territory." "Okay, have fun," I said, sitting back down. "Bring me back a shrimp cocktail." "You're coming with me." "What? No, you said I'm a liability." "Leaving you here alone is the liability now," James said grimly. "Knox and Beckett are needed at the perimeter. I can't leave you unguarded. The safest place for you is right next to me in a room full of witnesses." He unzipped the garment bag. Inside was a dress that made my breath hitch. It was deep emerald green, silk, with a slit that went up to there and a neckline that plunged to here. "James," I squeaked, that is not a forensic accountant's dress." "It's a power play," he said, his eyes darkening as he looked at the dress, then at me. "You aren't going as my accountant. You're going as my partner." "Partner?" "Date. +1, whatever the humans call it." "Whatever the humans call it?" I narrowed my eyes. "You say that like you aren't one." James froze. He cleared his throat loudly. I meant whatever the socialites call it, Cleo. Wealthy people are a different species. Now get dressed. The car is downstairs. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of the full-length mirror. The dress fit like a second skin. It was scandalous. It was gorgeous. I looked like a Bond girl who was about to ruin someone's credit score. I walked out into the living room. James was waiting. He was wearing a tuxedo, a classic black tuxedo that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. He was adjusting his cufflinks, but his hands stopped moving when he saw me. The silence stretched. He didn't say a word. He just stared, his gaze traveling from my heels up to my eyes. His pupils dilated so fast I thought he was having a stroke. He inhaled deeply, his chest expanding against the starched white shirt. "Well?" I asked, twirling nervously. "Do I look like a valid deduction?" James walked over to me. He moved with that predatory grace that always unsettled me. He stopped inches away, his heat enveloping me. He reached out, his hand hovering over my waist, not touching, but the intent was there. "You look," his voice was a rough growl, low and possessive. "You look like trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble?" "The kind of trouble that starts wars," he murmured. He finally let his hand rest on the small of my back. His grip was firm, claiming, "Stay close to me tonight, Cleo. If Ryan even looks at you, I will remove his eyes." "James, we are going to a charity gala, not a gladiator match. No removing eyes." "We'll see," he grunted, guiding me toward the elevator. "Clause 22, the landlord reserves the right to neutralize threats to the tenant's safety." "You're making these clauses up as you go along." "Read the fine print," he smirked, as the doors closed. We descended toward the lobby, toward the gala, and toward Ryan Blackwood. I clutched my glittery clutch bag, which contained a small canister of pepper spray, just in case. I felt like I was walking into the lion's den, or, considering the way James was looking at me, the wolf's den.
Chapter 8. The mayor's charity gala was held at the Metro Museum of Art, a venue that smelled of old money, expensive champagne, and desperation. James held my elbow in a grip that could crush diamonds. He steered me through the crowd like I was a nuclear warhead he was trying to smuggle past customs. "James," I whispered, smiling tightly at a woman wearing a chandelier as a necklace. "You have to relax. You look like you're about to bite someone." "The perimeter is porous," James muttered, scanning the room. His eyes darted everywhere, the exits, the waiters, the balcony. Too many blind spots, and the ventilation is recycling air too slowly. I can smell everyone. That's generally how breathing works. No, I can smell their intentions. I rolled my eyes. "Okay, Sherlock, what is that guy's intention?" I pointed to a waiter holding a tray of crab cakes. James glanced at him. "He wants to steal a bottle of wine and go home to play video games. He's harmless." His gaze shifted, snapping to the far side of the room. His posture went rigid, his tuxedo jacket straining across his back. He's not. I followed his gaze. Ryan Blackwood was standing near the ice sculpture, which was carved in the shape of a swan because, apparently, subtlety was dead. He looked like a GQ model who had sold his soul for good hair. He was wearing a midnight blue velvet suit, holding a scotch and laughing with the city comptroller. "That's him?" I asked. "The guy buying 50 grand worth of kibble?" "Don't look at him," James commanded, stepping in front of me to block my view. "He'll feel it." "Feel it? I'm not shining a laser pointer at him." "Cleo, listen to me. We are here to make a statement. The statement is, I am here, I am strong, and this is mine." "This," I gestured to myself. "I'm the this? I am a human woman, James, not a rent-controlled property." James looked down at me, the lights of the ballroom reflected in his dark eyes, making them look almost gold. He reached out and adjusted the strap of my dress, his fingers lingering on my bare shoulder. The heat of his hand made my knees weak. "You are under my protection," he said, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated in my chest. "In my world, that makes you mine to guard. Do not wander off.
do not accept drinks from strangers, and if I tell you to run, you kick off those ridiculous heels and you sprint. These are Louboutins, James. You bought them. I am not leaving them behind. I will buy you a shoe factory if we survive this, he growled. Suddenly, the crowd parted. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. The chatter died down, replaced with a tense, heavy silence. Ryan Blackwood was walking towards us. He moved with a fluid, predatory grace that mirrored James's. People instinctively stepped out of his way, clutching their pearls. He stopped 5 feet from us, swirling his drink. "James," Ryan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, flat, and disturbing. "James, I didn't think you'd come. You usually avoid mixed company." "I enjoy the arts," James said flatly, "and I enjoy checking on my investments." Ryan's gaze slid past James and landed on me. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. A slow, creepy smile spread across his face. "And who's this?" Ryan asked, stepping closer. "New assistant or something tastier?" James stepped forward, a low sound emanating from his throat, a growl so deep it was almost subsonic. "She is my auditor, Ryan, and she's very thorough." "An auditor?" Ryan laughed, the sound sharp and barking. "How quaint. You think a calculator can stop what's coming, James?" "I think math is universal," I piped up, stepping over from behind James's massive back. "And according to my calculations, Mr. Blackwood, you're trying to launder money through a shell company that's registered to a condemned warehouse. The IRS tends to frown on that. They're sticklers." Ryan blinked. His smile vanished. He looked at me with renewed interest, like I was a particularly interesting bug he wanted to squash. "She speaks," Ryan murmured. "Brave. Stupid. I like it." "Touch her," James said, his voice deadly calm, "and I will dismantle you right here in front of the mayor." Ryan chuckled, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Let's see who dismantles who, old friend. The night is young, and the moon is almost full." He walked away, vanishing into the crowd. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Okay, he's creepy, definitely supervillain vibes, but the moon is almost full? What is he, a werewolf or an amateur astronomer? James didn't laugh. He grabbed my hand. "We're dancing." "What? Now?" "I need to be close to you, and I need to calm down before I break the furniture."
Chapter 9. James Caldwell danced like he did everything else, with absolute, terrifying competence. He pulled me flush against his body. One hand held mine, the other rested firmly on my lower back, his fingers splayed wide, as if to shield as much of me as possible. We were swaying to a slow jazz number, but James wasn't relaxed. He was a coil of tension. "You're stiff," I murmured, staring at his bow tie. "Relax your shoulders. People are staring." "Let them stare," James gritted out. "It establishes dominance. It establishes that you need a massage or a Xanax." He looked down at me. We were so close I could see the individual specks of gold in his irises. He smelled intoxicating, clean linen, expensive cologne, and that underlying earthy scent of rain and forest that seemed to cling to him. "You challenged him," James said softly. "You stood up to Rian." "I told you I'm good at my job. He's a fraud, James. I saw his watch. That's a Patek Philippe. It retails for 80 grand. There is no way a pest control CEO affords that, unless he's dipping into the company funds." James's expression softened, just a fraction. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You noticed his watch?" "I notice assets. It's a curse." "It's a gift," he corrected. He spun me around, maneuvering us so that his back was to the room, shielding me from the rest of the dancers. "You are impressive, Cleo." My heart did a traitorous little flip. "Don't get sentimental on me, landlord. Is this part of the emotional distress compensation?" "No," he whispered. He leaned down, his face burying into the curve of my neck. He inhaled deeply, his nose brushing against my skin. It was such an intimate, animalistic gesture that I stopped breathing. "James," I squeaked, "what are you doing?"
Checking your scent, he mumbled against my pulse point. Your adrenaline is spiking. You smell like fear. I smell like Chanel number 5 and fear because my landlord is sniffing my neck in public. He pulled back, his eyes dark and dilated. I'm sorry, instinct. What instinct? The instinct to be a bloodhound? Before he could answer, a hand clapped onto James's shoulder. Cut in? It wasn't Rian. It was a woman. She was tall, striking, with hair cut into a sharp silver bob and eyes that looked like ice chips. She wore a tuxedo, not a dress, and she radiated power. James stiffened. Sloane, I didn't know you were in the city. Evidently, Sloane drawled. She didn't look at James. She looked at me. Her gaze was assessing, critical. So, this is the pet? Excuse me? I bristled. I am not a pet. I am a forensic accountant. And who are you, the Wicked Witch of the West Side? Sloane threw her head back and laughed, a harsh, barking sound. She has teeth. James, you didn't tell me she bites. She is under my protection, Sloane, James warned, stepping between us. She is off limits to the pack politics. Pack politics? I asked, looking between them. Is this a union thing again? Why is everyone in this city obsessed with unions? Sloane smirked. Something like that, darling. Look, James, I didn't come to fight. I came to warn you. Rian has brought reinforcements. There aren't local boys. They're mercenaries from the north. Big, nasty, and paid in blood. How many? James asked, his business mask slipping to reveal the warrior beneath. 6 inside, 10 in the garage, Sloane said, checking her nails. If I were you, I'd take your little accountant and make a tactical retreat, unless you want to turn this gala into a slaughterhouse. James grabbed my arm. We're leaving. Wait, I didn't get a shrimp cocktail yet, I protested as he dragged me off the dance floor. Forget the shrimp, James snapped, pushing through the crowd toward the service exit. Keep your head down, Cleo, and if you see anyone who looks too big for their suit, scream. That describes half the men in here. Then scream a lot, he said, kicking open the service door. It's going to be a loud night.
Chapter 10. The service corridor was stark white, smelling of bleach and old cooking grease. It was a jarring transition from the velvet-draped luxury of the ballroom. James moved fast, his hand clamped around my wrist. He wasn't running, but his walk was a power stride that forced me to jog to keep up in my heels. James, stop! I yanked my hand back. You're hurting me. He stopped instantly, turning to face me. The panic in his eyes was raw. I'm sorry, I need to get you behind a locked door. My car is armored. Once we're inside, you're safe. Why are 10 mercenaries coming after us? I demanded, breathless. Is this about the embezzlement? Did Rian hire a hit squad because I found his Cayman accounts? Because that seems like an excessive reaction to tax fraud. James grabbed my shoulders. Rian doesn't care about the money, Cleo. He cares about power. He wants my territory. And right now, you are the weak link in my armor because... He stopped, his jaw working. Because why? Because I care about you, he blurted out. It sounded angry, like an accusation. I know it. I smell it on me. If he takes you, he breaks me. I stared at him. The hallway went silent. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade away. You care about me? I whispered. Since when? Last week you threatened to evict me over a toaster oven. Since the moment you moved in and started arguing with me about the paint color in the lobby, James growled, stepping closer. He looked tortured. You are infuriating, you are chaotic, you have no survival instincts, and the thought of anyone hurting you makes me want to burn this entire city to the ground. He leaned in, his hand cupping my cheek. His thumb brushed over my lower lip. The air between us crackled with static electricity. I stopped breathing. He was going to kiss me. My landlord, my boss, my protector was going to kiss me in a service hallway next to a cart of dirty dishes, and I wanted it more than I wanted my next paycheck. James, I breathed, closing my eyes. Crash. The door at the end of the hallway burst open.
3 men in catering uniforms stepped in, but they weren't holding trays, they were holding crowbars. And just like the guys in the alley, their eyes were reflecting the light in a way that was distinctly not human. James pulled away from me instantly, shoving me behind his back. The romantic moment shattered like glass. "Get behind the linen cart," James ordered, his voice shifting into that scary, gravelly command tone. "But now." I scrambled behind a metal cart stacked high with dirty tablecloths. I peeked out just in time to see the first caterer charge. James didn't even take off his tuxedo jacket. He met the charge head on. He caught the crowbar mid-swing with one hand, wrenched it out of the guy's grip, and bent the solid steel bar into a U-shape. He bent the steel bar. "Okay," I whispered to myself, watching James kick the second guy so hard he flew 10 feet backward into a stack of trays. That's not karate. That is definitely not karate. The third guy hesitated. He looked at James, then at me. He lunged for the cart. "No!" James roared, but the guy was fast. He grabbed the cart and shoved it aside, reaching for me with a hand that looked more like a claw. I screamed, fumbling for my clutch. I ripped it open, bypassing the pepper spray, and grabbed the only weapon I had, my heavy, metal-encased forensic calculator. I swung it with all my might. Thwack! The corner of the calculator connected with the guy's temple. He grunted, stunned, blinking rapidly. "Math is universal, bitch!" I yelled. James was there a second later. He grabbed the guy by the back of his neck and threw him into the wall. The fight was over in 30 seconds. James turned to me, his chest heaving. His tie was crooked and his knuckles were bloody. He looked at the calculator in my hand, then at the unconscious man. "Did you just assault a mercenary with a TI-84? James asked, panting. "It's a TI-89 titanium edition," I corrected, shaking. "It's heavier." James stared at me for a beat. Then he threw his head back and let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a beautiful sound. "You," he said, grabbing my hand again, "are worth every cent of the trouble you cause. Come on, to the garage."
Chapter 11. The parking garage was dimly lit and smelled of exhaust and impending doom. "Where is the car?" I hissed, trying to keep up with James's long strides while holding my shoes in one hand and my calculator in the other. "Level B, spot 42. It's the black SUV with the reinforced bumper." We rounded the corner to spot 42. The SUV was there. So were 5 men, and Ryan Blackwood. Ryan was leaning against the hood of James's car, looking bored. The 5 men surrounding him were massive, like linebackers who ate other linebackers for protein. "Predictable, James," Ryan called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You always run to the car. You rely too much on technology." James stopped, pushing me behind a concrete pillar. "Stay here," he whispered. "Do not come out." "James, there are 6 of them." I grabbed his sleeve. "We need to call the police." "The police can't handle this," James said grimly. He started unbuttoning his tuxedo jacket. He tossed it onto the ground. Then he started unbuttoning his shirt. Not that I'm complaining, but is now the time to get naked?" "I need range of motion," he said, kicking off his expensive dress shoes. He stood there in his dress pants and white undershirt, barefoot on the concrete. He looked primal. "Cleo, listen to me. In my pocket," he pointed to the discarded jacket, "are the keys and a USB drive." "Okay." "The USB drive has the encryption key for Ryan's accounts. I stole it off his partner during the dance." My jaw dropped. "You pickpocketed him?" "I'm multifaceted. When I engage them, you grab the jacket, you get in the car, you lock the doors, and you crack that drive." "Crack it? Here?" "Ryan's funds are set to auto-transfer at midnight. That's in 4 minutes. If you don't stop the transfer, he gets $50 million to fund this war. Use the car's console. It connects to the satellite." "James, I can't do forensic accounting in the middle of a gang fight." "Yes, you can. You're the best. You told me so." He looked at me, his eyes burning. "Prove it." He turned and walked toward the 6 men. He didn't look afraid. He looked eager. "Last chance to walk away, Ryan," James called out, cracking his neck. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Get him."
Ryan ordered, lazily. The 5 goons charged. James didn't just fight, he exploded. He moved with a speed that blurred the air. He ducked a punch, swept the guy's legs, and threw him into the next guy. It was brutal, efficient, and mesmerizing. I dove for the jacket. I grabbed the keys and the USB drive. "Hey!" one of Ryan's men shouted, breaking off from the group to run at me. James saw him. He let out a roar, a terrifying, inhuman sound that shook the dust from the ceiling pipes. He abandoned his defense and tackled the guy mid-air, slamming him into a parked sedan with enough force to shatter the windshield. "James!" I screamed at me. "Go!" James screamed, his eyes flashing that eerie gold again. I scrambled into the SUV and slammed the door. Lock, lock, lock. Ryan was walking toward the car now, pulling a gun? No, not a gun. A crossbow. "Who brings a crossbow to a parking garage?" I yelled, jamming the key into the ignition. The dashboard lit up. "Welcome, James." I jammed the USB drive into the port. A screen popped up. "Caldwell's security interface. Unauthorized device detected." "Override," I shouted at the screen. "Password." Shit, password. I tried money. Access denied. I tried control. Access denied. I tried lease agreement. Access denied. The clock on the dash read 11:58 p.m. Ryan raised the crossbow. He wasn't aiming at James. He was aiming at the car tire. Thunk. The arrow pierced the front tire. The car lurched. "Okay, rude," I typed furiously. "Think like a landlord. Think like a grumpy, possessive alpha male." I typed mine. Access granted. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I muttered, seeing the transfer bar loading. 98% complete. "Cancel. Abort. Freeze assets." I mashed the commands. Transaction canceled. Funds frozen. Outside, Ryan's phone buzzed. He checked it. His face went purple. "She stopped it!" Ryan screamed, pointing at the car. "Kill the girl!" James turned. He saw Ryan pointing at me, and then James did something impossible. He dropped to all fours. A trick of the flickering overhead light made his shadow stretch, expanding into something massive and distorted. His clothes seemed to rip at the seams, or maybe it was just the angle, but the massive dark shape that launched itself at Ryan wasn't moving like a man. It hit Ryan like a freight train, tumbling them both over the concrete barrier and down to the lower level. "James!" I screamed. Silence followed. Then a siren wailed in the distance. I sat in the car with a flat tire, $50 million of frozen assets, and a distinct feeling that my landlord had just turned into a giant dog and thrown himself off a ledge. I am definitely not getting my security deposit back.
Chapter 12. I sat in the passenger seat of the SUV, staring at the concrete barrier where James had vanished. "He's dead," I whispered, clutching the steering wheel. "My landlord is dead. I'm going to have to deal with probate court. I don't even know if he has a will." My brain was doing gymnastics to explain what I had just seen. He turned into a dog. No, that was impossible. He was wearing a fur coat under his tuxedo? Also unlikely. Stress hallucination caused by carbon monoxide poisoning in the garage? That was the only logical explanation. Sirens wailed, getting louder. Suddenly, the rear door of the SUV ripped open. I screamed, brandishing my TI-89 calculator like a shiv. It wasn't Ryan's goons. It was Beckett and Knox. "Miss Vance," Beckett said, his blonde hair unruffled, though he was holding a semi-automatic weapon. "Please step out of the vehicle. We are initiating the extraction protocol." "James fell," I shouted, pointing at the ledge. "He tackled Ryan and they fell. It's like a 30-foot drop. And he looked fuzzy, like physically fuzzy." Knox grunted, scanning the perimeter. "Shadows. Trig of the light. Bad acoustics." "Bad acoustics made him look like a werewolf?" I demanded. "Yes," Knox said flatly. "Get in the van." A black van pulled up alongside the SUV. Beckett basically listed me out of the driver's seat and deposited me into the back of the van. "Wait, we have to go check the bottom level. We have to see if he's okay." "Mr. Caldwell is resilient," Beckett said, sliding the door shut. "He has elite parkour training. He knows how to roll with a fall." "Parkour training?" I stared at him.
You expect me to believe James I wear three-piece suits to breakfast Caldwell is a parkour expert? He has many hobbies, Beckett said smoothly, tapping on his tablet. We have secured the USB drive. You successfully froze the assets. Excellent work, Miss Vance. Mr. Caldwell will be pleased. I don't care if he's pleased. I care if he's a pancake. The van sped off, leaving the garage behind. I huddled in the leather seat, shaking. My adrenaline was crashing, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fear. I knew I had. The way his silhouette expanded, the sound of that roar. It wasn't human. But then again, James wasn't normal. He was too strong, too fast, too intense. Beckett, I asked, my voice trembling, who are you guys really? You're not logistics. You carry guns and talk about incursions. Is he in the mafia? Beckett and Knox exchanged a look. No, the mafia is disorganized. We are a private security firm. The principal is the James. We protect the principal. And the principal just threw himself off a building. Tactical descent, Knox corrected. I put my head in my hands. I need a drink. I need a drink and I need to review my lease agreement because I am 90% sure involvement in gang warfare is grounds for breaking the contract without penalty. We're taking you back to the tower, Beckett said. You'll be safe there. Safe? I laughed hysterically. I'm living in a glass box with a bunch of steroid-infused bodyguards while a crossbow-wielding maniac hunts me for my accounting skills. I am never safe.
Chapter 13. The penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. It had been 6 hours. I had paced a hole in the expensive Persian rug. Beckett and Knox were standing guard outside the front door like statues, refusing to let me leave and refusing to tell me anything. I was currently sitting on the kitchen counter, eating dry cereal out of the box because I was too anxious to pour milk. Ding! The elevator opened. I scrambled off the counter, dropping the box of Fruit Loops. James walked in. He looked awful and amazing. He was shirtless, his torso wrapped in white bandages that were already spotted with blood. He was wearing gray sweatpants that hung low on his hips. He was limping, and his face was bruised, a nasty cut traversing his cheekbone. "James!" I ran to him, stopping just short of hugging him because I was afraid I'd break him. "You're alive! You're walking! How are you walking?" "I told you," he rasped, his voice sounding like he'd swallowed a bag of gravel. "I'm fit." He walked past me, heading straight for the fridge. He pulled out a raw steak, no plate, no nothing, and just stared at it for a second before seemingly remembering he was a human being and putting it on a plate. "You fell 30 feet onto concrete," I accused, following him. "Beckett said you did parkour. That is a lie. I've seen parkour on YouTube. It involves more jumping and less gravity-induced trauma." James leaned against the counter, wincing. He looked at me, his dark eyes soft and exhausted. "I got lucky. I landed on a dumpster, a mattress dumpster." "A mattress dumpster?" I deadpanned. "In a commercial parking garage?" "It's a very luxurious garage," he lied, his lips twitching slightly. He reached out and took my hand. His skin was burning hot. "You stopped the transfer," Beckett told me. "You froze $50 million in 3 minutes." "I had motivation," I said, looking at his bruised knuckles. "Also, James, we need to talk about your password." James stiffened. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt charged. "What about it?" "Your password is mine?" I raised an eyebrow. "That is problematic. Possessive much." James didn't look embarrassed. He looked intense. He stepped closer, crowding me against the island. "It's easy to remember." "It's creepy. What does it refer to? Your money? Your building?" He looked down at me, his gaze dropping to my lips. He lifted his hand and brushed a stray Fruit Loop off my shoulder. "It refers to everything inside my territory. Everything I am responsible for." "I am not a thing, James." "No," he agreed, his voice rough. "You are definitely not a thing. A thing would be easier to manage. A thing wouldn't assault mercenaries with a calculator." "It was a TI-89 titanium," he reminded him. "It's heavy."
James chuckled, but then he winced, clutching his ribs. "Sit down," I ordered, pushing him toward a bar stool. "I'm gonna change your bandages. You're bleeding through them." "I heal fast. It's fine." "Sit down, or I will raise my hourly rate again." James sat. He watched me as I went to the first aid kit. His gaze was heavy, physical. It felt like a touch. When I came back and started unwrapping the bandages, I gasped. The wounds on his chest were weird. They weren't just scrapes. They looked like claw marks, deep, gouging lines that were already knitting together before my eyes. "James," I whispered, staring at the skin closing up. "You're healing visibly." He grabbed my wrist, stopping me. "I have a high metabolic rate. My cells regenerate quickly. It's a condition." "A condition? Like being Wolverine?" "Something like that," he said quietly. "Does it scare you?" I looked at the wounds, then up at his face. He looked vulnerable, waiting for me to run away. "No," I said, honestly. "It's actually kind of convenient. Saves on medical bills." James let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. He leaned his forehead against my stomach, just resting there. "You are insane, Cleo Vance. Pot meet kettle," I whispered, running my fingers through his hair.
Chapter 14. By the next afternoon, the penthouse had transformed into a command center. James was working from home, which apparently meant barking orders into a phone while pacing around shirtless. I had suggested he put on a shirt. He claimed the fabric irritated his healing skin. I claimed he was just an exhibitionist. Beckett and Knox were joined by two more security consultants, a woman named Lina who sharpened knives while she watched TV, and a guy named Silas who just stared at the door and growled if anyone walked by in the hallway. "Okay, this is ridiculous," I announced, walking into the living room with my laptop. "I need to go to the office. I have other clients, James. Mrs. Gable needs her tax returns filed." "Mrs. Gable can wait," James said, not looking up from a blueprint of the city sewer system. "You are not leaving the tower." "I am a prisoner!" I threw my hands up. "A prisoner with high-speed internet and access to premium steak, but a prisoner nonetheless." "You are a target," James corrected. "Rian survived the fall. He escaped." "Of course he did," I muttered. "Did he land on a mattress dumpster too?" "He had help," James said grimly, "and now that his money is frozen, he is desperate. Desperate predators are unpredictable." "I am not afraid of Rian," I lied. "I have my calculator." "Cleo, sit down," James sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look at this." He turned the blueprint toward me. It was a map of the city's underground tunnels. Several areas were circled in red. "What is this?" "This is how Rian is moving his crew around the city unseen. These tunnels run directly under the financial district and under this building." "Okay, so we weld the basement doors shut. Problem solved." "It's not that simple. He's looking for something. He's not just moving troops, he's excavating." I squinted at the map. The red circles formed a pattern, a spiral. "Wait," I said, my accountant brain kicking in. "Zoom out." James pinched the screen. "That's not just a random search pattern. That's the old Prohibition-era smuggling route. But look where the center of the spiral is." James looked. "The City Hall archives?" "No, deeper. Below the archives. See this line? That's the old municipal bank vault. It was decommissioned in the 50s. James went still. "The vault," he whispered. "Of course, the founder's cash." "The what?" "Nothing." James stood up, his energy shifting from exhausted to electric. "The old bank vault. He thinks there's gold down there." "Is there?" "Something better than gold," James said, grabbing his shirt, finally. "He's trying to find the deed." "The deed to what? The bank?" "The deed to the territory," James said, his eyes flashing. "The original land grant for the entire city district. Whoever holds the physical deed holds the legal claim to the land. If he gets that, he can evict me." "He wants to evict you? This whole gang war is a landlord dispute? That is the most petty, bureaucratic villain motivation I have ever heard." "It's about dominion,"
James said seriously. "But yes, it's a landlord dispute, and we need to get to that vault before he does." "We?" I stood up. "Oh no, you said I stay in the tower." "That was before you solved the map," James said, grinning. It was a sharp, dangerous grin. "You know the layout of old bank vaults, don't you? You audited the First National last year." "I did," I admitted. "I know the drilling points." "Then suit up, Cleo. We're going spelunking." "I hate that word," I groaned, "and I don't have spelunking shoes." "Clause 45, James shouted, already heading for the elevator. "Tenant must assist in property line verification." "I am going to rewrite that lease with a red marker when this is over," I yelled, running to grab my boots.
Chapter 15. The tunnels were damp, dark, and smelled like history decomposing. James led the way, holding a high-powered flashlight. I followed, wearing a tactical vest James had forced onto me over my sweater. Knox brought up the rear, carrying a bag of equipment that clanked ominously. "Are we there yet?" I whispered. "My feet are wet." "Quiet," James hissed. "Sound travels." We were deep under the city. The walls here were old brick, slick with moss. "James," I whispered again, moving closer to his back, "why does Ryan want the deed so bad? Can't you just fight him in court? You have good lawyers. You have me." James stopped. He turned off the flashlight, plunging us into near darkness. The only light came from a distant grate overhead. "It's not about the law of man, Cleo," James said softly. "It's about the old laws, the laws of tradition. If Ryan holds the deed, the pact is broken. My security team will have to leave the city. We lose our home." "Oh," I said, feeling a pang of sympathy. "Okay, so we save the home. I get it." He looked down at me in the shadows. "You're trembling." "It's cold and spooky, and I think I saw a rat the size of a terrier back there." James reached out and pulled me against him. He wrapped his arms around me, engulfing me in his heat. It was instantaneous comfort. "I won't let the rats get you," he murmured into my hair, "or Ryan." We stood there for a moment in the dark tunnel. It felt incredibly intimate. The rest of the world, the auditors, the mercenaries, the overdue rent, faded away. There was just James, solid and warm, smelling of rain and danger. "James," I breathed, looking up at him, "you're really weird, you know that, right? You growl, you heal like a superhero, you act like you own the moon." "I don't own the moon," he said, his voice husky, "just the buildings under it." He leaned down. His lips brushed mine, a feather-light touch that sent a shockwave through my entire body. I gasped, gripping his vest. He groaned, a low rumble in his chest, and deepened the kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was hungry. It was desperate. He kissed me like he wanted to devour me. His hands slid down to my waist, pulling me so tight I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. For a second, I forgot we were in a sewer. I forgot everything. Then Knox cleared his throat loudly. "Alpha, movement, 12 o'clock." James broke the kiss, breathless. His eyes were glowing gold in the dark, actually glowing. "Right," James said, his voice sounding strangled. "Movement." He turned away, shielding me behind his body. "What is it?" I asked, peeking around him. Ahead of us, the tunnel widened into a large, circular chamber. In the center stood a massive, round, steel door, the bank vault. But we weren't alone. Standing in front of the vault was Ryan. He looked worse for wear. His arm was in a sling, and he had a nasty limp. But he was smiling. And next to him, tied to a chair, was Mrs. Gable? I gasped. My elderly client, the one who needed her tax returns filed, was sitting there, looking terrified in her knitting cardigan. "I figured you'd come for the deed," Ryan called out, his voice echoing in the chamber. "But I needed insurance, and since I couldn't get to you in your tower, James, I went for the next best thing, your client list." "You kidnapped an 80-year-old?" I shouted, stepping out from behind James. "That is low, Ryan, even for an embezzling psychopath." "She's leverage," Ryan shrugged. "Here's the deal, James. You open the vault, since only a Caldwell can open the biometric lock, and I let the old bat go. You refuse, my boys have a snack."
From the shadows of the tunnel behind Ryan, 4 pairs of yellow eyes blinked open, then 4 low, hungry growls filled the air. James went rigid. "Let her go, Ryan. This is between us." "Open the vault," Ryan commanded. James looked at me. Then he looked at Mrs. Gable, who was shaking. "Do it," I whispered to James. "We can fight him for the deed once she's safe." James nodded. He walked forward, his hands raised. "Fine," James said. "You win the round." He approached the massive steel wheel. He placed his hand on the center scanner. Click, whir. The gears groaned. The massive door began to swing open. But as the darkness of the vault was revealed, a scent hit me. It wasn't the smell of old paper or gold. It smelled like explosives. "James, wait!" I screamed, realizing the equation too late. "The structural integrity, the vibrations, it's rigged." James spun around. Boom!
Chapter 16. The world went white. Then it went gray. Then it went loud, a ringing, high-pitched squeal that sounded like a microphone feeding back inside my brain. I waited for the pain. I waited to be shredded by shrapnel or crushed by the ceiling. But I wasn't. I was encased in something warm, hard, and smelling of burnt linen and ozone. I coughed, my lungs seizing on the dust-choked air. I opened my eyes. James was hovering over me. He had effectively created a human tent, bracing his arms and legs on either side of my body, taking the entire force of the blast with his back. "James," I croaked. He didn't answer immediately. He shuddered, a full-body spasm that terrified me. Then he lifted his head. His face was gray with dust, blood trickling from his nose, but his eyes were blazing with that terrifying gold light. "Status, are you intact?" "Am I intact?" I yelled, though it sounded like a whisper to my ringing ears. "You just took a bomb to the back. You should be dead. You should be a collection of body parts." "Reinforced tactical vest," he lied through gritted teeth. He pushed himself up, groaning. As he moved, I saw the back of his tactical vest was shredded. The skin underneath was scorched and angry. But I watched, I swear I watched, as the bleeding slowed and stopped in seconds. "That is not a vest, James. That is your skin." "Good dermatology routine," he muttered, grabbing my arm and hauling me to my feet. "Knox, report." "Secure." Knox's voice boomed from the other side of the smoke cloud. The dust settled enough for me to see Knox standing by the tunnel wall. He was holding Mrs. Gable tucked under one arm like a football. Mrs. Gable looked disheveled, but surprisingly unbothered. "That was very loud. You hope you have insurance for hearing aids, young man." "I'll buy you the factory," James promised, stumbling slightly. He leaned heavily on me. "Ryan." "Gone." Knox spat. He used the blast to cover his exit. The tunnel behind the vault has collapsed. We're cut off from the south. "Then we go up," James commanded. "Emergency maintenance hatch, 300 yards back." We moved. It was a nightmare trudge. James was clearly in agony, though he refused to let me support his weight. He kept one hand on my shoulder, guiding me, his grip bruisingly tight. "You knew," I accused him as we splashed through a puddle of questionable sludge. I admitted the sulfur. Too late. "You threw yourself on a blast for me." "It was C4, actually, more stable." "Don't semantic check me. You could have died." James stopped. We were at the maintenance ladder. He turned me to face him, his dusty, blood-streaked face inches from mine. "Clause 1, he whispered, his voice rough. "The landlord is responsible for structural integrity. You are part of the structure now, Cleo. If the foundation cracks, the house falls. I don't let the house fall." I stared at him. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "You are the worst landlord in history, and the best." "Climb," he ordered, slapping my butt to motivate me up the ladder. "Hey, harassment!" "Survival. Move." We burst out into the cool night air of an alleyway in the financial district. I fell onto the pavement, gasping. Knox climbed out after us, setting Mrs. Gable down gently. "Well, that was an exciting audit. Did we find the tax deduction, young man?"
I looked at James, who was leaning against a dumpster, looking like a fallen god of war. "No, Mrs. Gable," I said softly, "but I think we found a motive." James slid down the wall to a sitting position, his eyes rolling back in his head. "James!" I scrambled over to him. "Just need a minute," he slurred. "Regeneration takes calories. I need a burger." And then the invincible James Caldwell passed out cold.
Chapter 17. Why are we at a veterinarian? I hissed. It was 3 a.m. We were in the waiting room of Pause and Reflect, a 24-hour emergency animal clinic on the edge of the city. The waiting room was empty, except for a guy with a lizard in a shoebox and us. James was in the back exam room. "It's a specialized clinic," Beckett said. He had met us there with the van. He looked calm, which made me want to hit him with a clipboard. "Dr. Eris is the best trauma surgeon in the network. He treats Great Danes, Beckett. I saw a poster for heartworm medication on the wall." "James has unique physiology," Beckett said, smoothing his tie. "Regular hospitals ask too many questions about why a man's burned wounds are healing before they can apply gauze. Dr. Eris is discreet. Because he usually treats hamsters? Because he owes James a favor." The door opened. A man in a white coat came out. He didn't look like a vet. He looked like a bouncer who had put on a lab coat as a disguise. "He's awake," Dr. Eris grunted. "He's asking for you, and for protein." I rushed past him into the exam room. James was sitting on a stainless steel table, the kind usually reserved for golden retrievers. He was shirtless, again, and his back was wrapped in fresh bandages. He was eating a bucket of fried chicken that Knox must have fetched. "You're eating a thigh," I noted, standing in the doorway. "You were unconscious 20 minutes ago." "Metabolism," James mumbled around a mouthful of chicken. "I burn through energy fast when I repair tissue. I need about 10,000 calories in the next hour." 10,000? James, that's an elephant's diet. "I'm a big guy." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Is Mrs. Gable safe?" "Knox took her home. He told her it was a gas leak hallucination and gave her a voucher for free rent for a year. She seems happy." James nodded. "Good. Now the deed." "James, stop." I walked over and put my hands on his knees. "You were blown up. You need to rest. We can worry about the deed tomorrow." "James doesn't rest," James growled, his hands coming up to cover mine. "The vault was empty. That means the deed is hidden somewhere else, somewhere Rian hasn't thought of, but he will." "The vault was a decoy," I said, my mind racing back to the tunnels. "Your ancestor? Jericho Caldwell, my great-grandfather. Jericho wouldn't put the most valuable paper in the city in a damp hole in the ground. He was a businessman, right?" "He was a territorial leader, but yes, a businessman." "Businessmen hide things in plain sight," I said, pacing the small room. "James, did Jericho leave any journals, any ledgers, anything besides the building itself?" James frowned, wincing as the movement pulled at his burns. "There's the master lease, the original document for the Ironwood building. It's framed in my office." I stopped pacing. "The one on the wall? The one with the weird calligraphy?" "Yes, it's just a historical artifact." "Is it?" I looked at him. "Or is it a cipher?" James stared at me. "You think the deed to the territory is written on the lease for the apartment building? It's the perfect hiding place. Rian is tearing up the underground looking for a vault, while the legal claim has been hanging above your desk the whole time." James hopped off the table. He swayed, grabbing the edge for support. "We need to get to the penthouse," he commanded. "You can barely walk." "I don't need to walk," he grinned, a feral, dangerous expression that made my breath catch. "I have a very motivated tenant to drive me. I am driving, but only because if you pass out behind the wheel, my insurance won't cover it. Deal." Chapter 18. The drive back to the penthouse was tense. Every shadow looked like a mercenary. Every pothole felt like a landmine.
When we got into the office, the forbidden room I had never been allowed in, I gasped. It wasn't an office, it was a war room. Maps covered the walls, weapons hung on racks, swords, axes, and things that looked like torture devices. But my eyes went straight to the large framed document behind the massive mahogany desk. The lease of 1924. "Get it down," James ordered, sinking into his leather chair. He looked pale again. I pulled the heavy frame off the wall and set it on the desk. "Okay, let's look at the numbers." "It's text, Cleo, not numbers." "Everything is numbers if you look hard enough," I muttered, pulling a magnifying glass from my bag. Yes, I carry one, don't judge. I scanned the document. It looked like standard legalese from the 20s. Whosoever holds this land, rights of way, easement for water. Wait, I squinted at the bottom paragraph. The rent schedule. It's inconsistent. It was the Depression, Cleo. James closed his eyes. Prices fluctuated. No, I tapped the glass. Look at the cents column. 0.01, 0.12, 0.16, 0.08, 0.01. That's not inflation, that's a sequence. James opened one eye. A sequence? 1, 12, 16, 8, 1. ALPHA. Alpha? He frowned. Why would Jericho write a rank on a document from 1924? It's not just a rank, I said, circling the numbers. It's a substitution cipher for coordinates, and it's the password. I grabbed a notepad and started scribbling. If we apply a standard A1Z26 alphanumeric substitution to the sequence. I worked for 10 minutes. James watched me in silence. "Got it," I whispered. "What?" James leaned forward. "It points to the lobby," I said, circling the letters. "It's coordinates." "And a password." "What are the coordinates?" "The foundation stone," I read the decoded message, "beneath the wolf's head." James went still. "The statue in the lobby, the gargoyle." "And the password," I said, looking up at him, "is pack." James let out a low, bitter laugh. Of course, Jericho was a sentimental old wolf. "So the deed is in the lobby?" "Inside the cornerstone," James said. "We have to break it open." "Great! More destruction of property. I'll get the sledgehammer." "Cleo?" James said softly. I looked up. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. It was awe, mixed with something terrifyingly intense. "You just solved a riddle that has stumped my family for 3 generations. In 10 minutes, with a magnifying glass." "I told you," I shrugged, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "I'm worth the effort." "You are," he murmured. He stood up, walking around the desk. He didn't look injured anymore. He looked powerful. "You are worth a hell of a lot more than effort." He reached out and took my chin in his hand. "You have proven yourself, Cleo, to the territory, to me." "Is this the part where you give me a raise?" I joked weakly. "This is the part," he whispered, leaning down, "where I tell you that you are no longer just a tenant. You are essential." Boom! The building shook. Not a little shake, a massive, earth-shattering tremor. The lights flickered and died. The emergency red lights bathed the room in blood-colored hues. "Ryan!" James roared, turning toward the door. "He's here?" I grabbed my calculator. "How did he get past the gate?" "He didn't," James said, sniffing the air. "He's on the roof. He's coming down." "The roof? But we're on the top floor." James grabbed a sword from the wall, a literal broadsword. "Exactly," he said, handing me a heavy iron fireplace poker. "Welcome to the siege, Cleo. Try not to die. I have plans for you later."
Chapter 19. The glass ceiling of the penthouse, the beautiful bulletproof skylight, shattered. Ropes dropped down. Men in black tactical gear rappelled into the living room like ninjas, if ninjas were the size of refrigerators and smelled like wet dog. "Behind the desk!" James bellowed. I dove behind the mahogany desk just as the first wave of gunfire erupted. Ping, ping, crack. "Bullets?" I screamed, covering my head. "I thought this was a melee weapon fight." "They're tranquilizers," James shouted back. He leaped over the desk, sword flashing in the red light. I peeked out.
It was chaos. James was a whirlwind of violence. He didn't use the sword to stab, he used the flat of the blade to smash ribs and send men flying across the room. Beckett and Knox burst in from the hallway, guns blazing, but there were too many of them. And then Ryan descended. He didn't repel, he dropped. He landed on the coffee table, crushing it. He was dressed in full combat gear, looking like a demonic general. "James!" Ryan roared. "Give me the coordinates. I know the girl solved it. I can smell her smug satisfaction from the helicopter." "I resent that," I yelled, popping up. "It's called professional pride." Ryan turned to me. "Grab her." Two mercenaries lunged for the desk. "Oh, no, you don't." I grabbed a heavy crystal decanter of scotch from the desk and hurled it. It smashed into the first guy's face. He howled, clutching his eyes. "Alcohol burns. Science." The second guy grabbed my ankle. I brought the iron poker down on his wrist with a satisfying crunch. "Let go of my tenant," James' voice thundered. He threw a mercenary across the room, literally threw him, and landed in front of the desk. He was breathing hard, blood dripping from his earlier wounds, but he looked magnificent. "Ryan," James growled, "this ends tonight. High noon, or high midnight." "Duel?" Ryan sneered. "You're weak, James. You're bleeding. You've been playing house with a human while I've been building an army." "This human," James said, pointing his sword at Ryan, "just decoded the Founder's puzzle in under 15 minutes. She has done more for this territory in a week than you have in a decade." I blinked. "Aw, that was sweet." "Then she dies first," Ryan snarled. He signaled to the mercenary nearest the desk, a wiry man who had stayed out of the fight. The man lunged for the computer, while Ryan pulled a detonator from his belt. "I rigged the support columns," Ryan smiled cruelly, distracting James from the man at the desk. "Give me the coordinates, or I bring the roof down on all of us." James froze. "He's bluffing," I whispered to James's back. "He's not suicidal. He wants the deed." "He's a fanatic," James hissed. "He might do it." "James," I said, my voice steady. "The numbers, the lease." "What?" "Clause 99, I lied. In the event of total structural failure." James looked back at me. He understood. We didn't have a Clause 99. It was code. Do something crazy. "Clause 99, James repeated, a slow grin spreading across his face. He dropped the sword. Ryan laughed. "Surrendering?" "No," James said. "Evicting." James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small remote, the one for the automated window shades. He pressed the open button. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows behind Ryan began to slide open. The howling wind from 40 stories up rushed into the room. "You think a breeze will stop me?" Ryan scoffed. "No," James said, "but gravity will." James didn't lunge at Ryan. He lunged at the floor. He stomped his foot hard. The floor under Ryan's feet, weakened by the earlier impact of his landing, groaned. "Cleo, hold on," James yelled. James stomped again. The floor gave way. Ryan's eyes went wide as the section of the floor beneath him crumbled. He flailed, grabbing for the edge, but the wind and the angle were against him. With a scream of rage, Ryan Blackwood fell through the hole in the penthouse floor, plummeting down into the apartment below. "That," James dusted off his hands, "is why I never fixed the structural damage in Unit 39B. I stood up slowly, looking at the gaping hole in the floor. "You dropped him into the vacant unit?" "It has a reinforced steel security door," James said, though his expression remained grim. "It won't hold him forever, but it buys us time." "You are," I shook my head, "unbelievable." The remaining mercenaries looked at the hole, then at James, then at the open window. They collectively decided they didn't get paid enough for this. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands. "Beckett," James barked, "process them and call the repair crew. We have a hole in the floor." He turned to me. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him swaying again. "Cleo," he said softly, "you threw a decanter. It was aged 18 years, a tragic waste." James laughed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of smoke, blood, and victory. "I'll buy you a distillery." "Just buy me dinner," I mumbled into his chest, "and maybe explain why you have a sword." "Family heirloom," he whispered. "Come on, let's get the deed before Ryan figures out how to pick a lock."
Chapter 20. The elevator ride down from the penthouse felt less like a descent and more like a decompression chamber. The air was thick, smelling faintly of the ozone from Ryan's explosives and the metallic tang of James's blood. James leaned heavily against the mirrored wall. He was shirtless, his chest a map of rapidly healing scratches and soot. He looked like a marble statue that had been dropped from a moving truck, beautiful but dangerously cracked. "James," I said, my voice trembling as I tightened my grip on the heavy iron fireplace poker. "You're vibrating." He opened his eyes. The gold in his irises wasn't fading, it was swirling, restless, like liquid magma looking for a vent. "It's the adrenaline crash. My body is trying to knit bone and skin back together while running on empty. We should go to a hospital, a real one, not a vet clinic that smells like wet dog." "No time," he grunted, pushing off the wall as the floor indicator ticked down to L. "Ryan might be gone, but the vacuum he left is dangerous. The council will be here. They'll smell the blood in the water." "The council," I repeated, adjusting the strap of my ruined dress. "The homeowners association from hell?" James looked at me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, softening the terrifying intensity of his gaze. He reached out, his large, rough hand cupping my cheek. His thumb brushed away a smudge of dirt near my lip. "You threw a decanter," he said, softly, a note of genuine awe in his voice. "An 18-year-old Scotch?" "It was self-defense. And panic. Mostly panic." "It was magnificent," he corrected. He leaned in, stealing a quick, hard kiss that tasted of iron and smoke. "Stay close to me, Cleo. The lobby is the boundary line. Once we hold the deed, the building recognizes the alpha. But until I have that paper in my hand, we are just squatters." "Squatters with a sledgehammer," I noted, pointing to the heavy tool he had grabbed from the maintenance closet on our way out. "Exactly." The elevator chimed, a cheerful, generic sound that felt completely out of place in a war zone. The doors slid open. The lobby was dark. The power outage I had triggered at the substation was still affecting the grid, so the only illumination came from the moonlight streaming through the massive glass front doors and the red, pulsing glow of the emergency exit signs. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that happens right before a thunderstorm breaks. "Where are the mercenaries?" I whispered, stepping out. "Gone," James murmured, his bare feet silent on the cold marble. His head tilted, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. He was hunting. "Queer," he decided, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He marched toward the far corner of the lobby, toward the ugly stone gargoyle that had terrified me every time I checked my mail. "The foundation stone," James said, hefting the sledgehammer. Jericho really did have a flair for the dramatic. "Wait," I hissed, grabbing his arm before he could swing. "Are we sure this is the right statue? Maybe Wolf's head refers to something else, a painting, a metaphorical head of the family." "It's the gargoyle, Cleo. It's the only thing in this building that hasn't been renovated since 1924. I tried to remove it 3 times. The contractors always quit. They said it gave them nightmares." James didn't wait for further accounting audits. He planted his feet, gripped the handle, and swung the sledgehammer with a grunt of exertion. Crack! The sound was deafening in the silent lobby, echoing off the high ceilings like a gunshot. Dust puffed out from the gargoyle's snout. "James, that's load-bearing masonry." "It's decorative," he shouted over the noise. Crack! A large chunk of granite fell away, crashing onto the polished floor. James swung again, his back muscles bunching and rippling with the effort. With a final, shattering blow, the wolf's head split open down the middle. I coughed, waving the cloud of stone dust away from my face. "Okay, you broke the ugly dog. Now what?" James dropped the hammer. It clattered loudly on the floor. He reached into the hollow cavity of the broken pedestal, ignoring the sharp edges of the stone. His hand came out holding a metal cylinder, sealed with heavy red wax. He popped the cap. With trembling fingers, he pulled out a roll of parchment. It was old, yellowed, and crackled as he unfurled it. "The deed," James whispered. The tension in his body seemed to drain away, replaced by a surge of fresh power. "The original land grant, signed by the mayor and the Pack Alpha in 1924.
I leaned in, trying to read the faded ink over his arm. Does it say anything about rent control? It says, James read, his voice gaining a strange resonant strength, that the holder of this document is the master of the Ironwood territory. His word is law. His walls are sanctuary. A strange hum filled the room. The lights, the emergency lights, the exit signs, even the street lamps outside flickered violently. It felt like the building itself was waking up, taking a deep breath after holding it for decades. It accepts me, James said, looking at the paper with reverence. The building knows. Boom. The front doors of the lobby didn't open, they exploded inward. Shards of safety glass sprayed across the marble floor like diamonds. I screamed, ducking behind James as the night air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet asphalt, and something wilder. Through the broken frame, figures marched in. These weren't Rian's sloppy mercenaries. These men and women moved with fluid, terrifying grace. They wore expensive suits, but they didn't walk like businessmen. They walked like predators. At the front was a man with silver hair, impeccable posture, and a face that looked like it was carved from ice. "James," the man said smoothly, stepping over the glass, "you've made quite a mess." Chapter 22. James didn't flinch. He handed me the deed. "Hold this," he commanded softly, not taking his eyes off the silver-haired man. "Do not let go of it, even if they tear your arm off." "That is not a comforting instruction, James." I clutched the paper to my chest, my knuckles turning white. James stepped forward, placing himself between me and the newcomers. "Darius, you're late. The party is upstairs." Darius, the executioner James had warned me about, stopped 10 feet away. He looked at the sledgehammer, then at the rubble of the gargoyle, and finally at James. "We received reports of explosions," Darius said, his voice cultured and cold. "We heard Rian Blackwood breached the perimeter. We came to collect the bodies and secure the territory." "Rian is gone," James said, his voice flat. "Evicted." "Is he?" Darius looked around, his gaze landing on me. He sneered, a lip curling to reveal teeth that looked too sharp for a human. "She lives," James growled, a low rumble starting in his chest. "Then you have failed," Darius declared. He signaled to the 6 massive men behind him, enforcers. They fanned out, blocking the exits, cutting off our path to the street. "The code states that a human who witnesses the war must be silenced. You know this, James. You wrote the bylaws." "The bylaws have changed," James said, his fists clenching at his sides. "You don't get to change the laws just because you kept a pet," Darius snapped, losing his cool veneer. "You are weak, James. You let Rian destroy your home. You let a human female run around your war room. You are unfit to hold the territory." Darius drew a weapon from inside his jacket. It wasn't a gun. It was a long, silver spike etched with runes. "Step aside, James," Darius commanded. "We will handle the girl. It will be quick." I froze. I clutched the deed tighter. I had faced mercenaries and thugs, but this felt different. This was authority. This was the Wolf Police, and they wanted to put me down. "I'm an accountant," I squeaked, peeking around James' arm. "I'm very useful at tax time. I know deductions." "Silence," Darius roared at me, his eyes flashing silver. James let out a sound. It started low in his chest, a vibrating rumble that shook the floor beneath my feet. "You want her?" James asked, his voice dropping to a terrifying, demonic whisper. "She is a liability," Darius argued. "She is a leak. She," James took a step toward Darius, "is the reason this building is still standing." Chapter 23. James didn't stop walking. He advanced on Darius, unarmed, shirtless, and bleeding, yet looking twice as dangerous as the armed enforcers. "She decoded this cipher," James said, each word a hammer blow. "She stopped Ryan's funding. She found the deed." "A human cannot hold the deed," Darius scoffed. "She holds it right now," James roared. He turned back, pointing at me. "Look at her, Darius. Smell her." Darius frowned. He sniffed the air. His eyes widened. "You," Darius breathed, looking at James with horror. "You marked her." "I claimed her," James corrected. He stood in the center of the lobby, arms spread wide. And then it happened. James's body convulsed, his spine arched, cracking audibly. His skin seemed to ripple as coarse, dark fur erupted along his shoulders and down his arms. His fingernails lengthened into black, razor-sharp claws. His jaw unhinged, pushing forward into a snout as his teeth grew into terrifying ivory daggers. He didn't fully transform. He held the halfway point, the monstrous hybrid form of a werewolf. He towered over Darius now, 7 feet of muscle, fur, and rage. "I, James Caldwell, Alpha of the Ironwood, claim Cleo Vance as my mate." The voice wasn't human. It was a distorted, guttural boom that rattled the chandelier. "Her debt is paid. Her safety is my blood. Her life is my life." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. Claiming a human wasn't just rare, it was forbidden. It was biological heresy. "You signed your own death warrant," Darius whispered, raising his silver spike, though his hand trembled. "The council will never accept a human Luna." "Then the council is fired," James snarled, saliva dripping from his fangs. He let the alpha power, the raw, psychic dominance of a king flood the room. It hit me like a physical wave, heat rolling off him. "I hold the deed," James bellowed. "This is my soil, my stone, and you are trespassing in my queen's house." He looked at the enforcers. He looked them dead in the eye with burning, molten gold irises. "Kneel." It wasn't a request. It was a command woven into the magic of the deed and the blood of the alpha. The enforcer on the left dropped first, his knees hitting the marble with a sickening crack. Then the next. Their wolf instincts couldn't fight the direct order from the territory owner. They whined, dropping their weapons, forced down by the sheer weight of James's authority. Darius shook, sweat beaded on his forehead. He fought it. He gripped his silver spike until his knuckles turned white. "James," Darius gritted out, "this is madness." "This is the new lease," the wolfman hissed. Darius groaned, his legs buckling. He dropped to one knee, lowering his head in forced submission. James stood over him, chest heaving, fur bristling, claws twitching. He extended a clawed hand. "Come, Cleo," he rasped. I walked past the kneeling wolves, my legs trembling so hard I thought I might fall. I took his hand, careful of the talons. He pulled me into the elevator, pressing the button for the penthouse with a claw tip. "You really need to work on your tenant relations," I whispered, staring at the fur on his arm. James didn't smile. He couldn't, not with those fangs. He just stared at the closing doors, watching Darius's hate-filled eyes disappear as the metal slid shut.
Chapter 24. The moment the elevator doors closed, shielding us from the lobby full of kneeling werewolves, James collapsed. He didn't faint. He just slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. The fur receded, retreating into his skin like a magic trick played in reverse, leaving him shirtless, sweating, and looking terrifyingly human again. "James?" I knelt beside him. "You okay? You just went full teen wolf down there." They knelt, his voice sounding like broken glass, but they won't stay kneeling. "What do you mean? You're the alpha. You did the roar. It was very impressive." James looked up. His eyes were still rimmed with gold. "They knelt because I showed strength, but I also showed weakness. I claimed a human mate, Cleo. To them, that is biological heresy." "Heresy?" I bristled. "I'm an accountant, not a cult leader." "It makes me vulnerable. They think I'm compromised. The silver-haired man, that was Darius. He's not just a council member. He's the executioner for the old laws." "Executioner?" My stomach dropped. "For whom?" "For any alpha who breaks the code.
James grabbed my hand. His grip was desperate. By claiming you, I put a target on your back larger than this building. Darius isn't going home to sleep. He's going home to draft a challenge. So we fight him, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. No, we can't fight the law. We have to outmaneuver it. The elevator dinged, penthouse level. The doors opened and chaos hit us. Beckett was screaming into a phone. Knox was loading a shotgun. The hole in the floor where Rian had fallen was surrounded by yellow tape, but the plywood covering had been smashed upward. "He's gone," Beckett yelled, seeing us. Rian blew the balcony doors in 39B and rappellated down before we could breach the unit. "How?" James roared, surging to his feet. "How does he survive the fall and escape?" "He had an exit strategy," Knox growled. "But Alpha, we lost the data core." James went pale. "The financial backups?" "No," Beckett shook his head grimly. "The registry. During the standoff, the mercenary by the desk didn't just stand there. He swept the portable drive, the one with the list of every pack member, their human identities, their addresses, and their families." James cursed, a sound that shook the room. "He's going to dox us. He's going to expose the pack to the humans." "If he releases that list," James turned to me, his eyes wild, "the government will come for us, scientists, military. It will be a genocide." "He wants leverage," I said, my brain kicking into gear. "He doesn't want to expose you. He wants to rule you. He's holding the list hostage." "Then we have to pay the ransom," James said, defeated. "I have to give him the territory." "No, we don't pay ransoms. We audit the hostage taker." "Cleo, this isn't a tax return." "It's leverage, James. Rian has the list, but he needs a way to distribute it. He needs a platform, a network." I ran to my laptop. "If I can trace his upload signal, I can brick his device before he hits publish." "You can do that?" "I'm a forensic accountant. I track digital footprints for a living. Rian Blackwood might be a werewolf, but he's about to get hacked by a human." Chapter 25. For 3 hours, the penthouse was a command center of panic. James was pacing, growling orders to his security teams across the city. Beckett was sharpening a machete, which was not helpful for morale, and I was typing so fast I thought my keyboard might catch fire. "I found him," I shouted. James was at my side instantly. "Where?" "He's not in a bunker. He's at the radio tower, the WXYZ broadcast station on the North Peak." "He's going to broadcast the list over the emergency frequency," James realized. "Old school, hard to block." "I can't block the signal remotely," I admitted. "His encryption is military grade, probably stolen from you." "We have to go there," James said, grabbing his jacket. "We have to physically cut the line." "Wait," I stopped him. "If you go there, you're playing his game. He knows you're coming. It's a trap, James, just like the vault." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." I turned the screen toward him. "Look at the power grid for the North Peak. It's routed through the main city substation." "So?" "We don't need to cut the line at the tower. We need to trip the main breaker at the substation. If I cut the hard line, the tower's backup generators will kick in, but there's a 30-second delay before the switchover. That latency will corrupt his upload packet." James stared at the schematic. "You want to cause a blackout to create a 30-second lag?" "I want to brick his file transfer," I corrected. "If the power cuts mid-upload, the encryption key fragments. He won't be able to broadcast the list. He'll have to start over from zero." "But we need authorization to cut a main line. The city grid is locked." "James," I looked him dead in the eye, "I know the city comptroller's illegal password. I did his taxes in 2022. He uses his mistress's name." James stared at me. His mouth twitched. "You know the city comptroller's illegal password?" "I know everyone's secrets, James. That's why you hired me." "I hired you because you were cheap and desperate," he corrected, a smile finally breaking through his stress. "And now I'm priceless. Do I have permission to commit a felony, landlord?" "Clause 77, James grunted, leaning down to kiss my forehead hard. Tenant is authorized to engage in light cyber terrorism to save the pack. On it. I hit enter. Miles away on the North Peak, the lights of the radio tower winked out. The signal died. We bought time, I exhaled, but Ryan is going to be pissed. Let him be pissed, James growled, his eyes glowing. Now he's in the dark, and I hunt best in the dark. Alpha, Knox barked from the door. We have company. It wasn't Ryan. The elevator doors opened, and Darius, the silver-haired council member, walked in. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 6 enforcers, massive men carrying ceremonial silver pikes. You cut the city power, Darius said, his voice cold. You risk exposing us to save us. Reckless. I saved the registry, James snapped. You let a human interfere in pack affairs, Darius countered, pointing a pike at me. She knows too much. She wields power she does not understand. The old laws are clear, James. State them, James challenged, stepping in front of me. A human who knows the secret must either be turned or removed. She can't be turned, James said. The bite kills 90% of humans. Then she must be silenced, Darius said, leveling the weapon. Over my dead body, James snarled, his claws extending. Wait, I shouted, stepping out from behind James. Is there a third option, like a plea bargain? Darius looked at me with disdain. There is one, the trial of the moon, a test of worth. If a human wishes to stand by an alpha, she must prove she can endure the burden of the pack. I'll do it, I said instantly. Cleo, no. James grabbed my arm. The trial is physical. It's a hunt. They drop you in the woods and hunt you. If you survive till dawn, you pass. I can't outrun wolves, James. Exactly. It's an execution. Actually, Darius smiled thinly, the law says the trial must test the mate's greatest strength. Usually, for a wolf, that is strength or speed. But for her, he looked at my laptop, her strength is her mind, her calculation. So what? I crossed my arms. You want me to do a math problem while you try to eat me? Something like that, Darius said. Tomorrow night, the pack meeting. You will stand before the council. We will present you with the pack's impossible knot, a diplomatic crisis that has led to war for 50 years. If you solve it, you live, you reign. If you fail, the enforcers take your head. A peace deal, I whispered. You want me to broker a peace deal? It's impossible, James argued. The Northern War is blood feud. I'll do it, I said again, looking Darius in the eye. I know the city comptroller's illegal password. I negotiate with the IRS for a living. Your blood feuds don't scare me. Bring me the files.
Chapter 26. The files Darius sent over were not digitized. They were scrolls. Literally, dusty scrolls made of what I hoped was parchment and not skin. This is a mess, I muttered, sitting on the floor of the penthouse living room at 2 a.m. James, this isn't a war about territory. It's a war about water rights. James was sitting on the couch, watching me like a hawk. He hadn't slept. He was cleaning his sword. The Northern Pack controls the reservoir. We control the hydroelectric dam. They claim we hold back the flow. We claim they poison the source. We've been killing each other over it since 1970. It's a supply chain issue, I said, grabbing a highlighter. It's classic mismanagement of assets. It's honor, Cleo. They insulted my father. They insulted your father because he built a dam that flooded their hunting grounds, I pointed out, reading a scroll. James, your dad was kind of a jerk. He was a visionary. He was a bad zoning planner. Look, if I'm going to solve this, I need to offer them something better than an apology. I need to offer them profit. Wolves don't care about money. Everyone cares about money, James. Even wolves need to buy whatever it is you people buy, Kevlar vests and raw steaks. I started sketching a diagram. If we propose a joint venture, a shared revenue model from the dam's electricity sales, we can pay them reparations for the flooded land without admitting fault. We call it a resource leasing fee. They get paid, you keep the dam, the war ends. You want to pay them off? I want to make them business partners. It's harder to kill someone who signs your paycheck.
James looked at the diagram. He looked at me. His expression softened, the hard lines of stress around his eyes relaxing. You're turning a 50-year war into a spreadsheet. War is just aggressive negotiation, I said, capping my pen. I'm ready. Suddenly, the lights flickered. James stood up instantly. Power surge? No, I stood up too. I cut the power to the North Peak. That shouldn't affect us here. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked it up. Hello? Clever girl. Rian's voice slithered through the speaker. You turned off the lights, but you forgot one thing. What's that, Rian? Batteries. A high-pitched whine filled the room. It was coming from the vents. Gas, James roared. Cleo, hold your breath. He lunged for me, tackling me to the ground just as a hiss of white smoke erupted from the HVAC system. Wolfsbane, James choked, coughing violently. It's concentrated wolfsbane aerosol. He convulsed on top of me. James, I screamed, trying to push him off. James, get up. Can't, he wheezed, his eyes rolling back. Paralyzes the wolf, can't move. The door to the penthouse blew open. Not the elevator, the stairs door. Rian Blackwood walked in. He was wearing a gas mask. Behind him were two mercenaries, also masked. Wolfsbane doesn't hurt humans much, just gives you a headache. But for an alpha, it's like nerve gas. He walked over to where James lay paralyzed on top of me. He kicked James in the ribs. James groaned, unable to fight back. Get him off him, I yelled, clawing at Rian's leg. Rian grabbed me by the hair and hauled me up. The trial is canceled. I'm taking the alpha, and I'm taking his calculator. He dragged me toward the door. James, I screamed, reaching back. James's eyes were open, filled with golden rage and helpless tears. He tried to crawl, his claws scraping uselessly on the floor. Let her go, he rasped. Come get her, Rian laughed, if you can walk. Rian threw me to one of the mercenaries. Take them to the reservoir. We're going to end this war my way, by drowning the king.
Chapter 27. I had been kidnapped before, well, almost, in the alley, but being kidnapped by a werewolf terrorist was a distinct upgrade in terror. They threw me into the back of a van. James was thrown in next to me. He was conscious but paralyzed, his heavy body dead weight. They zip-tied his hands and feet with silver chains. The van sped off. James, I whispered, wiggling closer to him. Blink if you can hear me. His eyelids fluttered, focusing on me with difficulty. Panic flared in his gaze. Okay, I murmured, keeping my voice low. Wolfsbane paralyzes the wolf. Does it paralyze the man? He tried to speak, his jaw working, fighting the toxin. Slowly fading. Okay, listen to me. Rian is taking us to the reservoir. That's Northern Territory. He's trying to frame you. James blinked again. Yes. If the Northern Pack finds us there, they'll kill you on sight. I looked at his bonds. Silver chains. His skin was sizzling where the metal touched him. I need to get those off you, I said, but I don't have a key. I looked around the van. It was full of construction gear, Rian's cover business. There, in the corner, was a bottle of high-strength industrial solvent, methylene chloride. James, I scooted toward the bottle. I'm going to try something stupid. This stuff strips paint off steel. Just don't scream. I managed to grab the bottle with my tied hands. I uncapped it with my teeth. Silver is a metal, I whispered, but these chains are secured to the wall mounts with heavy-duty plastic ties. I poured the acetone over the plastic connectors near his wrists. It stung my eyes, the smell overpowering. James flinched, a low groan escaping his throat as the chemical hit his burnt skin. Sorry, I murmured. Just melt, you stupid plastic. The van hit a pothole. We bounced. Snap. The acetone had weakened the plastic tie enough that the force of the bump snapped it. The silver chain loosened. James took a ragged breath. He flexed his hand. It was slow, trembling, but it moved. Can you fight? I asked. Not yet, he whispered. Need trigger. What trigger? Pain, he said, or
Passion, something to override the toxin, adrenaline. Passion. I looked at him. We were in the back of a dirty van, kidnapped, smelling of chemicals. James, this is hardly the mood. Kiss me, he pleaded. His eyes were dark, desperate. Cleo, I need the bond. I need to feel you. You want me to kiss you to cure your paralysis? Yes. I didn't hesitate. I leaned over his battered, drugged body. I pressed my lips to his. It wasn't a sweet kiss. It was frantic. I poured every ounce of my fear, my anger, and my love into it. I bit his lower lip, drawing blood. James gasped into my mouth. A jolt went through him. I felt it, a literal spark. His heart rate skyrocketed against my chest. The paralysis was breaking. The mate bond was burning through the poison like wildfire. He deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping into my mouth, demanding, claiming. His hand, the one I had freed, shot up and gripped the back of my neck, holding me there. More, he growled against my lips. Don't stop. The van screeched to a halt. The doors flew open. End of the line, lovebirds, Rian's voice boomed. I pulled back, breathless. James's eyes were no longer hazy. They were burning gold. You made a mistake, Rian, James said, his voice steady, lethal, and terrifyingly calm. Oh? Rian smirked. What's that? You let her wake me up. James snapped the silver chains on his ankles like they were paper. He stood up in the van, crouching low, a predator ready to launch. Run, Cleo. And then he exploded out of the van.
Chapter 28. The reservoir dam was a massive slab of concrete cutting through the dark, churning water of the northern river. It was industrial, cold, and terrifyingly high. James didn't care about the height. He cared about the blood. He tore through Ryan's mercenaries like a hurricane made of claws and rage. The wolfsbane was still in his system. I could see it in the slight tremor of his hands, but the adrenaline and the kiss had given him a temporary, terrifying boost. Stay down, James bellowed, backhanding a mercenary into the side of the van with a sickening crunch. I ducked behind a stack of rusted oil drums. I am staying down, but Ryan is getting away. Ryan wasn't fighting. He was running toward the control house at the center of the dam. He's going for the floodgates, I yelled. James, if he opens those manually, he'll wash out the entire lower valley. That's a lawsuit you can't afford. James finished the last mercenary, a brutal, efficient snap of the neck, and turned. He was chest-heaving, his shirt in tatters, blood, some his, mostly theirs, soaking his chest. Stay here, James commanded, his eyes burning gold. I'm going to end this. He sprinted after Ryan, but before he could reach the control house, a sound cut through the night air. Vroom! It wasn't a howl, it was engines. From the northern ridge, headlights sliced through the darkness. A dozen motorcycles flew over the crest of the hill, engines screaming. Riders clad in leather and fur skidded to a halt on the dam, blocking the path between James and Ryan. The northern pack had arrived. The lead rider killed his engine and dismounted. He was huge, even bigger than James, with a beard that looked like steel wool and a scar running from his eye to his jaw. He held a massive, jagged axe. Trespassers, the Northern Alpha boomed. His voice was like grinding stones. In my water. Ryan stopped running. He turned, holding up his hands with a smile that was pure slime. Alpha Tauren, Ryan shouted. Thank the moon you're here. I caught this intruder trying to sabotage your floodgates. James skidded to a halt, growling. He's lying, Tauren. He kidnapped me. Tauren looked between them. He looked at James, battered, bloody, standing over unconscious bodies. Then he looked at Ryan, dressed in clean tactical gear, looking like a concerned citizen. I see the Southern King standing on my land, soaked in blood, and I see the spillway gates rigged to blow. Exactly, Ryan lied smoothly. I stopped him just in time. Help me finish him and the North is safe. Tauren raised his axe, pointing it at James. The other northern riders pulled guns and blades.
James Caldwell, Torin declared, for the crimes of trespassing and attempted sabotage, I sentence you to death. James crouched, ready to fight a war he couldn't win. He was outnumbered 20-1. Wait! I screamed. I scrambled out from behind the oil drums. I climbed up onto the hood of the battered van, waving my arms. Don't kill him! He's innocent, and Ryan is embezzling your water. Every head turned. Torin looked like I was a talking squirrel. A human? Torin scoffed. You bring a human to a war, Caldwell? I am not just a human, I shouted, my voice shaking but loud. I am a forensic accountant, and I have proof that Ryan Blackwood has been stealing from you for 5 years.
Chapter 29. The wind whipped my hair across my face as I stood on the van, staring down 24 werewolves. Get down, Cleo, James roared. They will kill you. Quiet, Alpha, Torin snapped. He looked at me with dangerous curiosity. Speak, human. You have 10 seconds before I let the pack eat you. How is he stealing my water? The chemical runoff, I yelled, pointing at the river below. You think James has been poisoning your water supply, right? That's why you're at war? The southern dam backs up the sludge, Torin growled. It kills our fish. It sickens our pups. It's not the dam, I said, my brain firing on all cylinders. It's the solvent. I pointed at the bottle of acetone I had used to melt the zip ties. Ryan owns a shell company called Pest Control, I explained fast, but his subsidiary is a chemical disposal firm. He's been dumping industrial waste directly into the shared reservoir. The chemicals sink, and because James's dam holds the water back, the toxins are trapped in your territory. He charges clients millions to dispose of it safely. Then he dumps it for free in your backyard and blames the dam for the pollution. Ryan's face went pale. She's lying. She's his pet. Check the pH levels, I challenged Torin. If it was stagnant water from the dam, the nitrates would be high. But if it's chemical dumping, you'll find traces of acetone and formaldehyde. Have you checked the water chemistry, Alpha Torin, or do you just bite things? Torin froze. He looked at the water. He looked at Ryan. My pups, Torin whispered. They had chemical burns, not rot. Exactly, I said, stepping down from the van. I walked right into the middle of the standoff. My legs were jelly, but I kept my chin up. James didn't poison you. Ryan did. James is just a landlord with bad zoning skills. Ryan is a criminal profiteer. And the solution? Torin asked, lowering his axe slightly. Why shouldn't I kill you both for the insult? Because I drafted a peace deal, I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my pocket. I had shoved my notes in there before the gas attack. A joint venture. I don't speak lawyer, Torin grunted. Money, I translated. James keeps the dam. You get 40% of the electricity revenue generated by the water flow. Based on current energy prices, that's roughly $40 million a year. But here is the kicker. The contract stipulates that 15% of that revenue must be reinvested into a filtration plant built into the dam. James pays to clean the water before it flows to you. You get paid, you get clean water, the war ends. Silence descended on the dam. The only sound was the rushing water. Torin looked at the paper in my hand. He looked at James. Is this true, Caldwell? Torin asked. You offer 40%? James looked at me. He looked at the fierce, trembling woman standing between him and death, wielding nothing but a spreadsheet and an attitude. A look of pure awe crossed his face. She speaks for the South, James said, his voice ringing with pride. Whatever she says, I sign. She is the queen of the lease. Torin laughed, a booming, barking sound. A human queen. He shook his head. She has guts. I like her. He turned to Ryan. The smile vanished. You, Torin growled at Ryan. You poisoned my pups? Ryan realized the game was up. His eyes flashed red. He pulled a detonator from his pocket. I'll kill you all, he screamed. I'll blow the... He never finished the sentence.
James and Torin moved at the same time. Two alphas, former enemies, united by a common hatred for a middle manager villain. They hit Ryan from both sides. There was a blur of fur and claws. Ryan didn't even scream. He was simply removed from the equation. He went over the railing, plummeting into the dark, churning water of the spillway he had tried to weaponize. Torin walked to the edge and spat into the water. Pollution, he grunted. He turned back to James. He held out his hand. Send the contract and the check. Done, James agreed, shaking the massive hand. Torin looked at me. He bowed his head slightly. Accountant. Then he signaled his pack. They mounted their bikes and roared off into the night, leaving us alone on the dam.
Chapter 30. The silence after the motorcycles left was deafening. I stood there, clutching my piece of paper, my knees finally deciding to give up. I slumped against the concrete railing. I did it, I whispered. I brokered a peace deal. I prevented a war. I need a raise. James walked toward me. He looked wrecked. His clothes were gone, save for the shredded remains of his pants. He was covered in grime, blood, and sweat. But his eyes were clear. The gold was soft, molten, and focused entirely on me. He didn't say a word. He just scooped me up. "James," I squeaked as my feet left the ground. "You're injured." "I'm fine," he rumbled, burying his face in my neck. He inhaled deeply, shuddering against me. "You're safe. You're safe." He carried me toward the small maintenance cabin at the end of the dam. It was the only shelter around. He kicked the door open. Inside, it was dusty and smelled of oil, but there was a cot in the corner and a working heater. James set me down on the cot, but he didn't back away. He stood between my legs, his hands resting on my thighs, his breathing ragged. "You faced a pack," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You stood between me and an axe. Why?" "Clause 1, I tried to joke, though my voice was breathless. "Protect the structural integrity." "Stop quoting the lease," he growled softly, leaning down until our noses touched. "Tell me the truth." "I love you," I blurted out. The words hung in the dusty air. I froze. I hadn't meant to say it. It just fell out. "I love you," I repeated, braver this time. "You're a terrifying, possessive, wolf-man landlord who eats raw steak and destroys public property. But you're mine, and I wasn't going to let them hurt you." James stared at me. For a moment, he looked stunned. Then a look of such raw, agonizing relief washed over him that it broke my heart. "You love the monster?" he whispered. "I love the man." I reached up and touched his bruised cheek. "The monster is just a bonus feature, like a balcony." James let out a sound, a low, guttural moan of surrender. "I don't deserve you," he rasped, "but I am never letting you go." He captured my lips. This wasn't the frantic kiss from the van. This was heavy, consuming. It was a promise. He kissed me until I was dizzy, his hands sliding up my waist, pulling me so close I could feel every hard plane of his body. The heat coming off him was intoxicating. It wasn't just body heat. It was the alpha power, the sheer force of his existence wrapping around me. "Cleo, I need you. Not just as a tenant, not just as a mate. I need all of you." I looked into his gold eyes. The fear was gone. The logic was gone. There was only him. "You have me," I whispered, pulling him down with me onto the narrow cot. No clauses, no conditions. Just us. Chapter 31. The maintenance cabin was cold, but I was burning. James moved with a desperation that mirrored my own. His hands were everywhere, rough, calloused, and demanding, yet treating me like I was made of precious glass. He stripped away my ruined blazer, my shirt, his touch leaving trails of fire on my skin. "You are so small," he groaned, hovering over me, his broad shoulders blocking out the dim light of the room. "I'm afraid I'll break you." "You won't break me," I breathless, running my hands over the scars on his chest, the muscles that coiled with tension. "I'm structural, remember?"
He laughed, a dark, husky sound against my skin as he kissed the hollow of my throat. Structural. He kissed his way down, his stubble grazing my skin, making me arch off the mattress. Every touch felt electric, amplified by the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. It was primal. It was the kind of want that didn't ask questions. When he finally settled between my legs, the weight of him was grounding. He paused, looking down at me with an intensity that stripped me bare. "Mine," he growled, his eyes flashing gold. "Say it." "Yours," I gasped. "I'm yours, James." He claimed me then. It was intense, overwhelming, and perfect. The connection went deeper than just physical. As we moved together, I felt a strange warm thrumming in the back of my mind, a sense of presence. It was him. I could feel his protectiveness, his adoration, his sheer overwhelming need for me. The mate bond. It wasn't scary. It felt like coming home. It felt like the final piece of an equation clicking into place. "Cleo." He choked out my name, his control snapping. We fell over the edge together, the world narrowing down to the sound of our breathing and the feeling of being completely, irrevocably intertwined. Afterward, silence reclaimed the cabin. James collapsed next to me, pulling me instantly against his chest. He wrapped his arms and legs around me, effectively cocooning me. "You realize," he murmured into my hair, his voice heavy with sleep and satisfaction, "that this violates at least 6 safety regulations?" I laughed, tracing a pattern on his arm. "I'll draft a waiver in the morning." "No waivers," he tightened his grip. "We're rewriting the whole contract. Clause 1, the tenant stays in the alpha's bed permanently." "I think I can agree to that term," I whispered, closing my eyes. Outside, the river rushed on, cleaner than it had been in years. Inside, for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about the future. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, in the arms of the wolf.
Chapter 32. Waking up in a maintenance shed on a cot the width of an ironing board should have been miserable, but waking up wrapped around a furnace-hot, possessive werewolf king made it significantly better. James was already awake. Of course he was. He was propped up on one elbow, watching me sleep with an intensity that would be creepy if it wasn't so devastatingly affectionate. "Stop staring," I mumbled, burying my face in his chest. "I have morning breath and I smell like river sludge." "You smell like victory," James corrected, his voice a deep morning rumble that vibrated through my bones. He kissed the top of my head. "And you smell like me. The mark has settled." I sat up, blinking in the dusty light. "The mark? Is it visible? Do I have a tattoo now? Because my mother will kill me." "It's a scent mark," James explained, running his hand down my back. "To any wolf, you now radiate a warning signal that says, 'Property of the alpha. Touch and die.'" "Romantic," I deadpanned, stretching. "Does it also get me a discount at the grocery store?" "I own the grocery store, Cleo. You don't pay." "Right, oligarch perks." I swung my legs off the cot. "We need to go back. Darius and the council are waiting to see if I survived the trial." James's face darkened. The playful lover vanished, replaced by the lethal king. "They sent you to die. They expected Ryan or Torin to kill you. When we walk back through those doors, things are going to change. I'm firing the council." "You can't fire a council, James. It's a governing body." "Watch me," he growled, standing up and pulling on his ruined pants. "I'm the landlord. They're just tenants." We stepped out of the shed into the blinding morning sun. Beckett was already there, leaning against the black van, which looked like it had been through a demolition derby. He was drinking a latte. "Morning, boss. Morning, Luna." Beckett grinned. "Luna?" I raised an eyebrow. "It's the official title," Beckett shrugged, tossing me a fresh coffee. "Knox told the guys you negotiated a 40% revenue split with the North. The pack chat group is blowing up. They're calling you the Iron Calculator." "That is a terrible nickname," I groaned. "It's better than the snack," muttered James, guiding me to the van. "Let's go home. I have a lease to rewrite."
The drive back was quiet but charged. James kept his hand on my knee the entire time, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. I could feel his emotions through the bond now, a low, humming current of protectiveness and pride. It was weird, intrusive, and completely comforting.
Chapter 33. The lobby of the Ironwood was exactly as we had left it, filled with tension and werewolves. Darius and the council hadn't moved. They had set up a command post in the seating area, looking grim. When the blast shutters rose and James walked in, shirtless, bloody, and radiating power, they all stood up. But when I walked in next to him, holding my coffee cup like a scepter, the room went dead silent. Darius stepped forward. He looked at James, then at me. He sniffed the air. His eyes widened. "She lives," Darius whispered, "and she bears the mark." "She does more than live," James announced, his voice booming off the marble walls. "She conquered." I stepped forward, pulling the crumpled piece of paper from my pocket, the peace treaty signed by Torin on a napkin. "Alpha Torin sends his regards," I said, slapping the paper onto the coffee table in front of Darius. "The Northern War is over. We have entered a joint venture for the hydroelectric dam. The South retains ownership, the North gets a royalty fee, and Rian Blackwhite has been liquidated." Darius picked up the napkin. His hands shook. You brokered a deal with Torin the Butcher?" "I appealed to his bottom line," I said coolly. "Wolves like money too, Darius. Who knew?" The other council members murmured. They looked at the paper, then at me, with a mix of fear and awe. "The trial was to prove worth. She stopped a war you couldn't end for 50 years. She saved the registry. She saved the territory." He looked around the room, his eyes flashing gold. "Does anyone challenge her claim?" James roared. Silence. Then, slowly, a woman in the back dropped to one knee. Then another. Darius looked at the contract again. He looked at James's lethal expression. He realized the era of the old laws was over. It was the era of the audit now. Darius knelt. "Hail the Luna," Darius murmured, bowing his head. "Hail the Luna," the room echoed. I stood there, feeling slightly ridiculous, but mostly relieved. "Okay, get up," I waved my hand. "This kneeling thing is bad for your knees, and we have work to do. Rian's shell companies need to be dismantled, and someone needs to fix the hole in the Penthouse floor before I trip and fall into Unit 39B. James laughed. He turned me around and kissed me right there in front of the council, a deep, claiming kiss that made my toes curl. "Welcome home, Queen of the Lease," he whispered against my lips. "Just call me Cleo, and maybe fix my sink. It's still dripping." Chapter 34. 2 weeks later, life had settled into a new normal. The new normal involved a lot of construction. "James, you cannot install a moat in the lobby," I argued, standing over a blueprint on the kitchen island. "It's a water feature," James corrected, looking offended, "for aesthetics. It's a tactical trench filled with piranhas. I saw the order form. They're ornamental piranhas." I rubbed my temples. Living with James was intense. He was the perfect partner, attentive, loving, and insanely hot. But he was also a micromanaging alpha who treated our apartment like a fortress. "We are safe, James," I reminded him. "Ryan is gone. The council is terrified of me because I audited their expense reports and found out they were writing off claw sharpening as a medical expense." James smirked, coming up behind me to wrap his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder. "You terrified them. It was very attractive." "I was just doing my job." "You rule them," he murmured, kissing the spot behind my ear that always made me shiver. "You domesticated them." "I just introduced a scheduling app," I said, leaning back into him. "It reduces territorial overlap." "Speaking of scheduling," James said, turning me around, "I cleared my calendar for the afternoon." "Oh, do we have a meeting?" "Clause 12, he grinned, that wicked, boyish grin that made him look 10 years younger. "Mandatory recreation time for the landlord and tenant." "James, it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I have clients."
"I bought your client list," he said casually. "I retired you. You work exclusively for the Caldwell estate now." "You did what?" I pushed against his chest. "James, you can't just buy my career." "I didn't buy it. I consolidated it into an empire." He picked me up and sat me on the counter. "Besides, you need the free time. We have a gala to plan." "What gala?" "The mating ceremony," he said, as if it were obvious. "The council insists on a public declaration, a coronation, next Saturday." "A coronation?" I groaned. "Do I have to wear a tiara?" "No," James leaned in, his voice dropping to a growl. "You wear the dress I bought you. The red one, the one that makes me want to start a war just so I can defend you." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop the smile. "You are impossible." "I am yours," he corrected.
Chapter 35. The coronation turned out to be less Game of Thrones and more Met Gala. The Ironwoods ballroom, which I didn't even know we had, it was apparently hidden behind a false wall in the basement, was decked out in gold and black. Every powerful wolf in the tri-state area was there. I stood on the balcony overlooking the crowd, wearing the red dress. It was backless, strapless, and cost more than my student loans combined. Nervous? James appeared beside me. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a glove, his hair slicked back, looking every inch the king. "A little," I admitted. "There are a lot of apex predators down there, and I'm pretty sure the catering is just piles of raw beef." "There is a vegan option," James assured me, "for the human guests, my lawyers." "Your lawyers are human?" "We don't trust wolves with contracts. They eat the evidence." I laughed, taking his arm. "Ready to go down there and face the music?" "There is no music," James said seriously. "Only the sound of them realizing who runs this city." We descended the grand staircase. A hush fell over the room. It wasn't the terrified stillness of the first night. It was a respectful silence. As we walked through the crowd, people bowed, not out of fear, but out of genuine deference. We reached the center of the room. Darius was there, holding a microphone. "Tonight," Darius announced, "we honor the Union of the South, the Alpha King and the Iron Queen." James took the mic. He didn't make a speech about power or territory. He looked straight at me. "For generations," James said, his voice echoing, "the Caldwell line has held this city by force. We thought strength was about claws and teeth." He took my hand and raised it. "But true strength," he continued, "is about integrity. It's about building a foundation that doesn't crumble. Cleo Vance didn't just fix my books, she fixed my pack." He turned to me, his eyes shining with unmasked love. "To Cleo," he toasted. "To the Queen," the room roared. I clinked my champagne glass against his. "That was a good speech. Did you write it?" "Beckett wrote it." I wanted to say, "She is mine, look away or I kill you," but he said that tested poorly with the focus group. "Beckett is wise." "Dance with me," James commanded, pulling me onto the floor. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by a room full of monsters who were now my friends and employees, I rested my head on James's chest. I could hear his two hearts beating, the human one, steady and calm, and the wolf one, wild and fierce. "You know, I think I'm going to renew my lease." "Oh?" James smirked. "For how long?" "Indefinitely, but I have some conditions." "Name them." "No more dead bodies in the alley, no more keeping secrets about magical societies, and we get a dog." James froze. "A dog? Cleo, I am a dog. I want a golden retriever, James, a real one, named Waffles." James groaned, dipping me low. "Fine, but if he pees on the rug, I'm evicting him." "Deal." Chapter 36. True to his word, James rewrote the lease. But true to my word, I got the dog. Waffles was a golden retriever with the IQ of a ham sandwich and a heart of gold. He was fluff, slobber, and chaos, and James absolutely hated him. Or so he claimed. I walked into the living room at 6 a.m. to find James sitting on the rug in his silk pajama pants. Waffles was currently lying on his back, paws in the air, while the terrifying Alpha King of the city rubbed his belly.
"Who's a menace?" James cooed in a voice I had never heard before. "You are. You're a tactical liability. Yes, you are." I leaned against the doorframe, sipping my coffee. Tactical liability? James snatched his hand away. He stood up instantly, composing his face into a mask of indifference. The beast was obstructing my path. I was attempting to move him. You were scratching his tummy. I was checking for ticks. Parasites are a threat to the pack. James, we live in a penthouse. The only parasite here is the window washer who overcharges us. Waffles rolled over, let out a fappy woof, and trotted over to headbutt James's leg. James sighed, looking down at the dog with a mixture of annoyance and secret adoration. "He sheds," James complained. "I found gold fur on my black suit. Do you know what the council thought? They thought I was going gray." "Tell them it's a fashion statement," I said, walking over to kiss his cheek. "Besides, he loves you. He thinks you're a giant grumpy puppy." "I am an apex predator," James grumbled, wrapping his arms around me. "Not a puppy." "Sure, Alpha, whatever you say." "Speaking of predators," James said, his tone shifting, "I need you to look at the acquisitions file for the East Side. The vampires are selling their nightclub district." "Again?" I pulled away, heading for my laptop. "I told you, buying nightclubs is a bad investment. The liability insurance alone is a nightmare." "It's strategic territory," James argued, "and I want to turn them into something else." "Like what? A wolf sanctuary?" "No," James smirked. "Tax shelters. You've corrupted me, Cleo. I used to think about blood feuds. Now I think about capital gains tax." That's the sexiest thing you've ever said to me. Chapter 37. 4 months later, the new normal hit a speed bump. I was in the middle of a high-stakes meeting with the vampire matriarch, trying to negotiate the purchase price of the Sanguine Lounge, when a wave of nausea hit me so hard I almost fell out of my chair. "Excuse me," I mumbled, bolting from the conference room. I barely made it to the executive bathroom before my breakfast made a reappearance. "Food poisoning," I groaned, splashing water on my face. It was the shrimp. I knew the shrimp at the Vampire Club was a bad idea. When I walked back out, James was waiting in the hallway. He wasn't in the meeting. He had been pacing outside like a bodyguard. He took one look at me and froze. His nostrils flared. He inhaled deeply, his eyes widening. "You're sick," he said, stepping closer, "but you don't smell sick." "I just puked, James. I definitely smell sick." "No." He grabbed my shoulders, pulling me into him. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling again. "Your scent has changed. It's sweeter, richer, and there's—" He stopped. He went completely still. "There's what?" I asked, feeling a cold sweat break out. "A second heartbeat," James whispered. My world stopped. "What?" "It's faint," James said, his voice trembling. He dropped to his knees right there in the hallway, ignoring the vampires walking past. He pressed his ear against my stomach. But it's there, fast, strong. I stared down at the top of his head. "James, are you saying we're going to have a pup?" He looked up at me. His eyes were swimming with gold tears. "Cleo, we're going to have a pup." "A baby," I corrected, my hand flying to my stomach. "A human baby." "Maybe," James grinned, a wild, ecstatic grin. "Or maybe a troublemaker who chews the furniture." "Oh, God," I leaned against the wall. "I'm not ready. I haven't even finished the audit for Q3. How am I supposed to raise a werewolf baby? What do they eat? Do I need to buy a leash?" "No leash." James stood up and scooped me into his arms, spinning me around. "James, put me down. The vampires are watching." "Let them watch," James roared, his joy echoing down the corridor. "The pack is growing." Chapter 38. 6 months later. The pregnancy was, in a word, supernatural. I didn't just get cravings, I got demands. One week, I needed pickles. The next week, I needed rare steak, which James happily provided. The baby was growing fast, too fast for a normal human pregnancy. Dr. Eris, the vet/doctor, monitored me daily. The child has lichen DNA, Eris explained, looking at the ultrasound. It accelerates development. You're not due in 9 months, Cleo. You're due in 7. And true to his word, at exactly 7 months, I went into labor during a board meeting. Okay, I breathed, gripping the edge of the mahogany table. Item 4 on the agenda. The Luna is having a contraction. The room erupted into chaos. Darius, who was now my loyal VP of operations, fainted. Beckett started screaming for the elevator. James simply ripped a conference room door off its hinges because it wasn't opening. "Hospital!" James bellowed, carrying me. "No time," Dr. Eris shouted, running in with a medical kit. "The pup is crowning. I told you, lichen biology doesn't wait for traffic." "Here?" I screamed. "In the conference room? No, I refuse to give birth next to a PowerPoint presentation." "It's a sterile environment," James argued, laying me down on the table after sweeping the documents onto the floor. "Breathe, Cleo. Focus on the numbers. Count backwards from 1,000,000. "I hate you," I yelled, gripping his hand so hard I felt his bones creak. "This is your fault, you and your super sperm." "I know, I'm sorry, I love you." James was pale, panic warring with instinct. It was fast, it was brutal, and it was the most terrifying moment of my life. But 10 minutes later, a cry filled the room. "It's a boy," Dr. Eris announced, holding up a small, wriggling bundle. James stopped breathing. He reached out with trembling hands. The baby was tiny, perfect, and, thankfully, not furry. He looked human. He had 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a tuft of black hair. But when he opened his eyes to look at his father, they didn't stay blue. They flashed bright, liquid gold. "A wolf," James whispered, tears streaming down his face. "My heir." He handed the baby to me. I gazed down at the little creature who had just wrecked my body and my schedule. "Hi," I whispered, touching his cheek. "You are definitely grounded until you're 18. The baby cooed, his eyes turning back to a soft human brown. "What do we name him?" James asked, kissing my sweat-drenched forehead. "Jericho, Titan, Slayer?" "No," I said firmly. "He needs a name that commands respect but sounds good on a resume." I looked at the baby. He looked calm, calculating. "Liam," I said. "Liam Caldwell." "Liam," James tested it, tasting the name. "The steadfast protector. I accept." Good. I closed my eyes, exhausted. Now, somebody get me a sandwich. And a lawyer. I need to add a dependent on my health insurance.
Chapter 39. Epilogue. 5 years later. The penthouse was no longer a cold glass box. It was a home. Toys were scattered across the Persian rug. Waffles, who was now a distinguished older gentleman, was asleep on the sofa, and Liam was currently trying to climb the bookshelf. "Liam, get down," I called out from the kitchen island, where I was reviewing the pack's annual budget. "You are not a squirrel." "I'm a wolf," Liam shouted back, jumping down with a terrifying lack of fear. He landed in a crouch, grinning. At 5 years old, he was already showing signs of shifting, mostly just growling when he didn't want to eat his broccoli. James walked in, wearing his suit. He had just come from a meeting with the mayor, who now knew about the pack and was very polite to us. "Daddy!" Liam tackled James's legs. James laughed, hoisting the boy onto his shoulder effortlessly. "Hello, monster. Did you terrorize your mother today?" "Yes, I ate a crayon." "That's my boy," James beamed. He walked over to me, leaning down to kiss me. "How are the numbers, Luna?" "Profits are up 15%, I said, closing the laptop. "The joint venture with the North is booming, and we just acquired the West Side docks." "Good," James murmured. "We need the space, especially since—" He looked at my stomach. I smiled. "You smelled it?" "Another heartbeat," James grinned, his hand resting warm on my skin. "Stronger this time." "Don't tell Liam yet. He still thinks he's the only prince." James set Liam down. "Go find Waffles, son. I need to negotiate with your mother." Liam ran off. James pulled a framed document from behind his back. "What is this?" I asked. "An addendum," James said. I looked at it. It was a fresh copy of the lease for my old apartment, the one that started everything, but James had written over it in gold marker.
Clause infinity. The lease is hereby void. The tenant and the landlord are joint owners, partners in crime, life, and raising monsters. Term, forever. I looked up at him, my eyes stinging. You ruined a legal document, I scolded softly. I improved it, James corrected. He pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. I love you, Cleo. You are the best investment I ever made. And you, I whispered, are the only liability I'm willing to accept. Outside, the city lights twinkled, a kingdom of glass and steel, guarded by a wolf and ruled by an accountant. And for the first time in the history of the pack, everything was perfectly, beautifully balanced. The end.